So check this out. I graduated high school in 2001. When I was in high school, I loved thrifting and sewing. I had my own sewing machine and would buy things at thrift stores and alter them to fit me. I'm very petite, 5 foot tall, but 115 pounds, so finding things to fit off the rack is always difficult. In the winter of my senior year, I found this beautiful vintage floor-length dress. It's black with magenta flowers all over it. It was a halter dress with a very deep V in the front. When I saw this dress, I thought, this is my prom dress. I bought it and then brought it home. The deep V in the front was a bit too revealing for me, and the dress was about 5 inches too long. So I decided to do an alteration, even though prom was months and months away. I hemmed the bottom of the dress, and with the extra fabric, I sewed a triangle into the deep V to make it less revealing. I tried it on and was very happy with the look. I put it away to save for prom since it was still several months away. Well, cut to prom season. I go to pull the dress from the bin it was stored in. It was polyester, so no wrinkles. And instead of the alteration I made to the deep V, there are perfectly sewn ruffles along the deep V along with ties to hold the V closed. The dress was still altered by me to fit my height, but the other alteration was not the same. I don't know how to sew ruffles like that. The dress was stored in a bin. I asked my sister and my mom, and they both swore that they didn't alter the dress. They didn't know how to sew anyway. I tried the dress on and the ruffles and the tie looked amazing, so I wore it just like that, but I still have no idea what the heck happened to my original alteration. Alright, so check this out. This happened a few months back and I'm new to Reddit, so I'm just now finding a place to post about it. It was really weird and I still think about it sometimes. A few months ago, my boyfriend and I were coming home from a trip to visit my family. We live in a small second-floor apartment that overlooks our parking lot. We were unpacking the car, bringing stuff upstairs little by little, and my family had sent us with a lot of food, so one load we brought up all that had to be unloaded into the fridge. As I was unloading the food, my boyfriend was standing at the corner and we were having a full conversation. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but it was something you wouldn't just walk away from. Anyway, he's standing there and as I'm talking, I turn around to put something in the fridge, but when I looked back, he was gone. I was confused because, again, we were in the middle of a conversation that I was like, is he hiding from me? Is he just playing a joke? So I started laughing and looking for him around the apartment. After a few minutes, I started thinking, what the heck is going on? Because he was nowhere to be found. Sometimes he steps onto the patio to smoke, so I opened that door, and while he wasn't on our patio, I did see him downstairs unloading the car. I was really confused about how he got downstairs so fast and why he left in the middle of our conversation. Well, he came back up a few minutes later and had to knock because apparently the front door was locked and he didn't have his keys. How did the front door get locked with him outside without keys and me not knowing that somehow he left? The door is in the kitchen that I was in. I would have heard the door open and close, but I heard or saw nothing if he left. I was also just literally putting something down in the fridge, so I had my back to him for like a split second. How could he possibly get to the door so fast and me not see anything? None of it makes sense to me, and when I asked him about it, he had no idea what I was talking about and no memory of our conversation while I was unloading food. It's all so strange. Alright, so check this out. My daughter got a book for Christmas. It's this really sweet little book that plays the tune of Row, Row, Row Your Boat. and each page has some artwork on it. The first page has 4 ducks floating down the stream, 3 yellow ducklings and 1 brown duck. The ducks are all facing the same way. Now, this is important. My daughter is 1, so right now she loves counting and repetition. Every time we see the ducks, she points to them and I count them out loud. I've done this at least 100 times already, and I'm not even kidding. She loves this book and won't let me put it down. My husband has also read it to her dozens of times, and he saw that she was pointing at the ducks, so he started counting out loud too. I was reading it to her this morning. It's a very short book, it's probably only 8 pages, and my husband was watching. Everything was normal until my daughter flipped to the first page again with the ducks, and my husband and I at the same time went, "What the fuck?" The duck at the back of the line is facing the other way now. I've looked at these ducks so many times over the last few days. I've counted them out loud God knows how many times, and they were all facing the same way. I would literally bet my life on it. I thought at first I could maybe explain it as some overtired parents getting it wrong, though honestly, I know this book like the back of my hand, so it seems like a massive stretch, but it's also the fact that my husband noticed the exact same thing at the exact same time, and he was weirded out too. We both looked at each other and back at the duck and were both in agreement that it's different now. I've read things on this subreddit before and have always been like, oh cool, I wish something like this would happen to me, but now that it has, I feel nervous and a bit crazy. I'm so glad that my husband is in the same position as me though. It confirms that I'm not going mad. Due to privacy concerns, I can't disclose my exact location. I live in a rural city in Washington state, and there was a major collision on the road near my house early Wednesday morning of last week. I was on my way to work but got stopped by the local deputies directing traffic at the accident scene. I had to call my manager and tell her that I would be late due to the backup. Well, I tuned into the local news after work to hear the details, and as it turns out, there was no accident. I understand that a minor crash could escape the local news headlines, but this one involved multiple vehicles. I remember seeing 3 ambulances parked next to the police. It was nuts. The following day, I scoured the local news and police Facebook updates to learn more about the large wreck, only to find it empty. I've asked neighbors and local police about it, and they have no recollection of it ever happening. Even worse, a local resident that I was chatting with on the morning of the accident was nowhere to be found today. On my way home this afternoon, I asked a local dog walker near the previous accident scene if he knew the guy I was talking to the previous day. I described the witness from head to toe so that there wouldn't be any confusion. At first, the dog walker looked at me with a dumbfounded expression, but then his expression changed to one of annoyance, as if he thought I was making a stupid joke. He told me that the guy I had allegedly spoken to had been dead for over a year. I don't know what to make of this. Several years ago, after browsing online, I recalled an eerie encounter I had with a peculiar man in a Manchester pub. It was in 2018 while I was going to watch Chase and Status at the Academy. Before the show, my ex and I had dinner and drinks. During our drink, I noticed a strange man near the bar area. His presence reminded me uncomfortably of a close friend who had passed away from a drug overdose at 19, even though this man was much older. As the evening progressed and the drinks flowed, I ended up talking to this man. He seemed friendly and mentioned he was a clairvoyant, offering to tell me my future. I'm generally uneasy about such things, fearing bad news or worrying unnecessarily. However, my partner at the time was curious, so he told me my future. It was frustrating because she was the one who wanted to know, yet I was the one receiving the information. He warned me of some alarming events, that I would mess up and lose my girlfriend, get into a fight and lose my front teeth, and even get stabbed, all within 3 months. My partner dismissed his predictions, calling him crazy. After sharing these startling predictions, he casually took 3 Xanax, gave me a hauntingly familiar smile, downed his drink, and then left. The friend that I had lost had also been involved with Xanax, and the similarity was so unnerving. Incredibly, the specific events that he predicted did actually occur exactly as he said, within 3 months. I recently asked my ex if she remembered that encounter, as it was one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. So, to keep a story short, I have a locker at work, and I always put my headphones there when I finish the job. It's a habit, and I'm the only one who does it in the whole working floor. Anyhow, last week I put my headphones there, and today, after Christmas, I was expecting to find them, but I didn't. I shrugged it off as maybe someone from cleaning or removed them since I wasn't there for 4 days straight, which isn't usual since it's a private space and shouldn't be tampered with. Anyhow, I was trying to find a logical explanation. I had a paper with me, I put it there and went off with my day, and later on in the middle of the day, I opened the locker again, and to my surprise, I found my headphones. Okay, I ignored that and went on with my day. But at the end of the day, I opened the same locker, but I didn't find the paper that I put in there. I went to the bathroom and went back to my locker about 30 or maybe 60 seconds later, opened the locker and I found the paper again. Dude, what the cinnamon toast fuck? Was all of this just a coincidence? This one's called, I bought my daughter the Stephen King book, Everything's Eventual for Christmas. She came into town and we had an early Christmas, and she took her book with her when she left. I had told her that I wanted to read it when she was done. She came home the other day and put her suitcase in her room. I got home from work this morning at around 7:30, and the book was at the foot of my bed, so I thought, oh, she must have finished it. I read a few pages, and then I went to sleep. When I got up this evening, I had asked her if she liked the book, and she said that she hadn't read it yet. I told her that I saw that she put it at the foot of my bed, so I thought she was done. But she didn't put it on my bed. She left it in her suitcase, and she hadn't been back in the house after I left until about 1 p.m. that day. Someone really wants me to read that book. December 25 at 6 p.m., something really weird happened. I ordered food at a local restaurant that I know was open, even on Christmas, and the phone goes to a voicemail with no message. Okay, fine. It's Christmas. I choose another restaurant the next town over. I visit their website, I click the link to call, I place the order, and then I head out to pick it up. This restaurant is 2 exits away on the highway. I drive past the first restaurant and I see that it's closed. All the lights are off. I get on the highway and see the exit 6. I need the next one, exit 7. There are no cars on the highway with me. I see lights way up ahead, but no surrounding vehicles. A song that I love comes on the radio that I almost never hear played, and it glitches out and the music stops. I look down to check it, and it comes back on, but now it's a different song, even though the radio says the first song is still playing. Not a big deal, but in looking, I see on the car clock that 20 minutes has passed and I've only been on the highway for what should have been about 5 minutes. I double-check the time on my phone, 20 minutes. I see the next exit coming up, and it's exit number 3. Somehow, I'm on the wrong side of the highway, much farther down. I think I must have gotten on the wrong ramp, which I never take because it leads to rural areas that I never go to, and misremembered seeing exit 6. I get off on this unfamiliar exit and try to turn around, but I can't find the other side of the highway. I grab my phone and turn my GPS on, but the home buttons on my phone are jumbled. I pull over, power cycle the phone, I get the GPS working, and it sends me in actual circles. About 10 minutes later, I find the highway and am back on in the right direction. There are cars everywhere now. I reach the restaurant, and they don't have my order, and they say I never called them. At this point, I'm completely out of gas when I had enough to make a round trip at the start of my journey. So, I pull into the gas station next door and fill up. I get back in my car and reverse search the phone number that I called. It's to a restaurant that I've never heard of. I go back to the website that I visited to place the order, and the numbers don't match. I look up the address of the other restaurant, I head there, I pick up my order, and I start home. On the way back, I pass the first restaurant again, and it's open with a line out the door. I pull into the parking lot just to sanity check. I call their number, and they've been open all night with no phone issues. I get home and my partner asks where the hell I've been, and I really wish that I had asked him to come with me because I have zero explanation for what happened. This person has an update. They say, I just found the settings for Google Maps and my app history says I never left home. This story is called, Has Anyone Else Ever Seen the Sun Shut Off? It's not really the best way to describe it, but it's the best title that I could come up with. Basically, the sun follows its usual pattern of day and night, yada yada. However, on multiple occasions, I've noticed that I'm just sitting in my room on my computer, and suddenly, it's night. It's not like I'm blinking or being foolish either, because the streetlights are on. The moonlight is clear and the sky is dark. It looks like any normal night would, but it happens for less than a second, and then it turns back to day as if nothing happened. This has occurred 3 or 4 times in my life that I can remember, all relatively recent. I talked to a doctor about it, and they told me that if that's the only thing going on, it doesn't sound like any hallucination that they're familiar with. Also, it's only from day to night. I don't believe I've ever seen the sun come out in the middle of the night. I might just be crazy or have brain damage or something, but at the very least, someone here might find this interesting. So hey, it's worth a post. Recently, I got a dog. Despite working long hours and having 2 kids at home, I try to do a 1-hour walk with the dog every evening. This is often after 8 p.m., so with it being winter now, it's already dark when I leave. I live in a rural village with some walking trails that run alongside a stream and between some agricultural fields. During my walk this night, my dog was suddenly startled by something. She's a hunting dog, so I'm used to her following her nose and running around me. That's why I have such a self-retreating leash. But suddenly, the dog starts running away until the leash is pulled to the maximum. However, she continues to pull after some corrections that I gave. I don't pay special attention to the environment around me when I walk. I just look at the path and listen to some music. But I felt that something was wrong. As I turned my gaze towards the field, I saw in the moonlight something in the distance walking on 4 legs, which at first sight looked like a deer to me. But when it got about 50 meters from me, it suddenly stopped and stood straight on 2 legs and looked at me. Reaching about my height, which is 1.8 meters or 5'11", Suddenly, I was cramped with fear. It felt like it could smell my fear and my dog's. But the silhouette of its head did face me as the dog stood some 5 meters from me, still floundering with its collar. Not really knowing what to do, I just stared back at it. Where I live, there isn't really lots of wildlife that I know of. I only know of deers that live there, and I've only encountered a fox, a hedgehog, and a hare before. But the dog was more intrigued by these encounters and didn't run away then. She wasn't afraid of cows or horses in the meadow either, but this was something else. She really wanted to get away from this. After about a minute or two, I tried to take my torchlight and face it towards it, but it didn't provide enough light to see what it was and just made everything darker around me when my eyes got used to it. Another 3 minutes pass away, just looking at the vague thing in the distance that still stood straight up, until suddenly a car showed up in the distance on a nearby road. The thing hopped back on 4 legs and ran off. Regaining my courage after some time, I still had to walk a 20 minutes home. This was the worst feeling of my life. I don't know if I'm ever going to walk my dog again. And what really makes me uncomfortable is I recently dreamt that something attacked my dog, and when it wanted to face me, I woke up totally in sweat and started hyperventilating. I really hope it was just a deer or something, but I don't know if a deer can stand straight for about 5 minutes. Recently, a wolf was spotted, which is very unusual in our region, but apparently it just passed here during its migration to a more forested area. There's also an animal shelter about 20 kilometers away, or almost 12.5 miles, that has some confiscated circus bears, but I don't think this was a bear. For those that are well versed in their cryptid knowledge, that is what is known as a not deer. Yesterday, my teenage kids and I were driving to meet with their grandparents across state, and we got there early and I had to pee. I sent off a text but didn't get a reply, so I decided just to go find a restroom as I still had time before we were supposed to meet. Not far down the road, at a light, we spotted them driving towards us in their green Kia and Grandma's hot pink hair. We all waved, and I had my kids send off a text letting them know that we'd be right back. They texted back confused because they were on the east side of town at Subway because they had gotten there early and were hungry, and sure enough, when we got over there a few minutes later, they were finishing up their sandwiches. My oldest and I are creeped out. We made eye contact and waved, or I never would have bothered having him send off the text because we were so early. There can't be that many old ladies with bright pink hair and that specific color car and model. She's very easy to spot, and I'd have doubted myself if my kid hadn't also seen them, and they also waved at us. I keep trying to logic it out, but it's just not logicking. This happened about an hour ago, and I'm still stunned. Me and my friend were playing A Way Out on our PlayStations when he said, "Wait a minute, I gotta go wash my hands, they're dirty." He was gone for about a minute, and when I heard him say, "Hey yo, I'm back," my phone kinda glitched, and that's what he sounded like. I thought the glitch was funny, and I talked to him about it. His character in the game moved a bit, and then he went silent. I kept playing the game and just thought he was being quiet on purpose. All of a sudden, I hear, "Hey yo, I'm back," with the same tone and the same phone glitch thing and the same volume, if that makes any sense. I thought maybe it was a coincidence and he came back twice and it lagged at the same time, but when he moved his character in the exact direction, at about the exact same distance, I asked what took so long, and he said his mom called him to help with something, and I don't know, man. I'm still pretty freaked out by that. My whole family remembers this as vividly as I do. I get home at approximately 3 or 4 in the morning after having been out drinking all night to find the front door locked and bolted from the inside, so my keys don't work. So I have to wake someone up to let me inside. Mom reluctantly and sleepily opens the door and asks me, "Why did you go back out again?" Well, I hadn't. I had just gotten home. But she says I came home about 2 hours prior, let myself in, and she spoke to me from across the room while she was watching TV. But I only said a couple of words and went upstairs to bed. My brother and dad both heard the conversation while they were upstairs and heard footsteps going up the stairs. So, naturally, my first reaction is to check upstairs, but there's no sign of anything. There were always spooky things going on in that house, so we just assumed the ghost had a thing for me. This writer includes an edit that says, many people asked to hear more stories about events in this house, so here's a couple more. My dad used to live in the house next door as a kid and had a Ouija board. They saw spirits quite regularly after this, like my nan saw some little girl crying in her bedroom once. I think my granddad saw a dead army vet walking through the house once and through a wall. I often wondered if my room became like the local ghost's hangout spot or something, because I sometimes felt someone sit at the end of the bed, but no one was there. My brother had friends stay in his room when I was out, and they said to him that they experienced weird stuff. Not sure what though, never found out any specifics. We had other little instances of different cats being scared and always looking up at the staircase, frightened. We had things like Legos come randomly flying down that staircase when everyone, including the cats, were downstairs. I also had one night where I got into bed and before falling asleep, it felt like someone laid on top of me, holding the sides of the covers down and rasped something that I can't quite recall now, straight into my ear. That one does actually send shivers down my spine just remembering and writing it out. But no full-on proper hauntings or anything that made us want to leave. We lived there for 20 years before my parents downsized. I go past the house sometimes as my dentist is still there, and I wonder if the newer residents have experienced anything, but I'm not knocking and asking. Hell, they might recognize me as having let myself in at 2 a.m. with them too at some point. I don't really know where to post this, but I do need to post it somewhere. My friends don't really follow weird events. By my bedroom is my desk, and it started with a foam ball. I found it by one of the legs of my desk. I do have cats, but I have no idea how it got into my apartment. My cats love it though, and I chalked it up to it just being in the hall and somehow rolling in. I only ever found these balls at one pet store, and it was my first time ever seeing them. The next time was an extra earring from a set that I already have. But this third one had the same wearing off marks as I had been wearing it. I only had the one pair and no extra. I decided it must have been one of my friends or something. Really, no big deal. Then, the third item was 2 metal keys. They weren't like house keys, but they were more like jewelry box keys. I don't own a jewelry box, and I've never seen these keys before. I also found a little toy of this Stranger Things looking dog monster. Neither my partner or I watch Stranger Things, and really none of our friends do. The items are always found in the same spot, and it's been 6 months starting with that yellow ball. I joked with my friends about the earring thing being a glitch in the Matrix because of that TikTok trend, but the keys really intrigued me. I genuinely don't know if this is a glitch or a dimensional portal or even where to post this, but I'd love to keep everyone updated as I imagine it'll happen again. Here's the TLDR. Random items I don't own or duplicates appear in one corner of my apartment. I tried explaining it away, but it always gets weird. When I tried to post on here, my second Reddit account was signed in instead of my main. I never switch, and I use my second account usually only on my computer, and I don't even know how that happened. My second account has no likes, no karma, and they know and don't want me to talk. This person includes an edit that says, "My cats are strictly indoor only. There's no way for them to escape as the entry door leads to the apartment hallway, and they're scared of that. They have no interest in going anywhere." About 20 years ago, I was living with my wife and our 3 little kids in a small house in California. I own a relatively nice Rolex from when I lived and worked in Switzerland. I had been gardening, so I took a shower, and before I did, I took my Rolex off and placed it on the white shelf cabinet that's over the toilet by the shower. Later that day, I realized that I had not put the Rolex back on, so I went back to the bathroom, but it wasn't there. In a mad panic, I called my wife and we went on a crazy, frenetic search for it. Multiple times I checked the shelf because it was just so weird that it wasn't still there. Along the way, I asked all of my kids if they had seen Daddy's watch, and my 2-year-old daughter told me that she'd put it down the toilet. She said it only once and never repeated, and it seemed weird because she was tiny and the shelf was way up above the toilet. So anyway, we called a plumber. The plumber ended up taking off the toilet and searching, but no Rolex. Dismayed, I resigned myself to the fact that it was probably in a pipe somewhere and I'd need to get a crew out to search for it. The next day, I walked into the bathroom and there it was, on the exact shelf that I had left it on. Same spot, even with the same side facing out. I was completely shocked. I called my wife, and we could think of no logical reason as to how it came back. In that time, I had looked, my wife had looked, and the plumber had stood right there for over an hour. Even the kids had looked. And I should add that the stress actually contributed to my wife having to go to the hospital later that week. The only thing that I could suspect was maybe the plumber found it immediately, but wanted the money to do the job, or my older son, who was 5 at the time, was smart enough to play such a prank on us. Then neither seemed feasible. Fast forward about 20 years, and 3 different houses across North Carolina. This year, we moved into a new house. While unpacking, I found that same Rolex, shoved into a Ziploc bag of personals from my bedroom side cabinet, sitting with the other bags placed on a small closet shelf system. I was a bit annoyed with myself because it's still an expensive watch, and although I never wear it anymore, I consider it my son's when I'm no longer around, and there it was, shoved in a bag with my keys and gum. So I took it out of the bag, gave it a wipe down, and placed it on its own empty shelf, telling myself that I'd move it to my watch cabinet when it was unpacked. I left and went back to moving and unloading and unpacking. And guess what? I was in the closet a few hours later and casually looked up at the shelf for the Rolex. The Rolex was gone. I emptied the shelves searching for it, but it was gone and I've never seen it since. Writing this out now, I have a whimsical thought in my head that there's a small shelf above a toilet in California with a Rolex on it. Here's some context. I'm a sophomore in college now, and this happened when I was maybe in 8th or 9th grade. I was scrolling through TikTok and saw an image of Lapis from Steven Universe, which reminded me of my friend that I knew from 8th grade who used to have Lapis as her PFP on Instagram. In 8th and 9th grade, I'll call her Ezra, was friends with this person named Harry who she met online. Harry was from Wales, had blonde hair, brown eyes, was gay and trans. This is important later. And the specific pic that I'm thinking of made it look like Harry was inside of a TV. Ezra used to post all the time about Harry. They were best friends. She'd even post DMs from him and pics of him calling him his little friend nicknames like BB or B. Around 1 year later, Ezra posts DMs of her and Harry fighting. They had this huge falling out, and they blocked each other on everything, if I remember correctly. Well, fast forward to my 11th grade year, just 2 or 3 years later. I'm at a restaurant with my friend, who's gay and now identifies as trans, and I'll refer to them as Ken. And they brought up that they had just recently met this person from Wales. Ken and Harry bonded over things like music and both being trans and gay. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Really random, I guess, but is this person named Harry? Ken looked shocked and asked how I knew this person's name when they had just met. To confirm it actually was Harry, I described what he looked like and pointed out other identifying features such as being trans. Ken becomes even more shocked and shows me a picture just to confirm that we're talking about the same person, and sure enough, we are. I asked Ken if they were comfortable with me messaging Ezra about it, and Ken said yes. I messaged Ezra asking what happened between them and Harry so I could warn my friend as a just-in-case kind of a thing. Ezra said that she had no clue who Harry was. I went back on her profile and couldn't find any proof of Harry ever existing, and she's denying ever knowing someone who I thought was her best friend. Assuming Ezra isn't just somehow repressing these really bad memories and not realizing it, I have no clue how I know who Harry was. Some of Ezra's friends used to comment on Harry's Instagram, and I couldn't find any proof of that either. I can't find proof of Harry ever existing online at that point in time, and it's making me feel like a crazy person. I have messaged Ken to ask if they remember Harry or still keep in contact with him, and there's no response yet. I'll edit this post with an update if there is one. Well, this person has an update. And it says, they turned into a turf woman and told me to fuck off forever. Ken told me Harry's Insta profile and it still exists. I won't disclose user due to privacy reasons, but unfortunately it's a private account anyway, and I don't want to request for worry of Harry knowing that I was talking about them. Ken also video chatted Harry and talked to Harry every day, so this almost completely rules out the someone else is pretending to be Harry theory. Also got a physical handwritten letter from Harry too. Here's another update from just a few hours later. They say, I have personally messaged Harry if he knows Ezra, as some of you have mentioned, and I'm waiting for a response. Ken said that they met Harry through a comments section of a music artist that they both like. And that's the last update for now. Who is Harry? So, I was at work the other day at a convenience store, and a guy bought some food and put $200 on his Cash App. His total came to around $225. He pulls out his cash, and it's a wad of 20s folded in half. I watch as he counts each bill while also counting along. We both came to $240 at the same time. I said something like, all right, $240, and pause while I recount the money. I recount it twice, and somehow he's only given me $140. I try to suggest that maybe he gave me the wrong pile of 20s, but he looks as genuinely baffled as I do. He just counted out the rest, and I finished the transaction. Right after that happened, my first thought was that a glitch? This person includes several edits. They say, alright, so as I'm writing this out, I'm wondering if he wasn't just trying to scam me. Was it on purpose to short me $100? There's another one. They say, thank you for all of the responses. When I first started writing this post, I legit thought that I had something. It wasn't till I was done typing it all that it actually clicked. Also, I always recount money even if I watch them count it out loud right in front of me. There's always a chance that a bill was stuck to another and that they gave me too much, or that they miscounted and shorted me. I'm from a very rural area and we don't usually have to worry about scammers. It's almost always local folks that come in, and I usually know 90% of everyone that does. Personally, I feel like this glitch was really just some sleight of hand, and it feels like the poster agrees as well. So this happened about a month or two ago, and I've been trying to explain it away ever since, but I can't. To start the odd day off, I woke up that morning to me standing in the middle of my living room at 3 a.m. I used to sleepwalk as a child, but I haven't had an instance of that for at least 15 or, maybe 20 years. There was a general feeling of uneasiness, but I just went back to bed to get a bit more sleep before work. Work was crazy, but nothing really weird happened. But I did feel the same uneasy feeling from the morning all throughout the day. Finally, my day ends and I'm too tired to even think about dinner, so I decide to roll through the drive-thru and just pick something up. It was a relatively large order, and the guy on the comm seemed like he wasn't really paying attention, so I was worried he'd miss some of the order. Thankfully, it seemed like everything was there as they put everything into one paper bag until it was busting out at the top. The lady at the window had to hand it to me from the bottom of the bag because there was no slack to grab from at the top. Because of this, I had to wrap an arm around the bag and pull it into the car that way. I looked down into the heavy bag and saw how full it was and thought about going through to double check the order, but I thought to myself, well, if they did mess the order up, at least there's enough food for me to eat still. Plus, the receipt reflected the appropriate items, so I just put it directly into the passenger seat, taking note again at how heavy it was and how it would have been better to give me 2 bags instead. I buckled it up to make sure it didn't tip over as, again, it was a pretty beefy bag, and headed straight home, making no stops. I made it home and had a bunch of stuff to carry in, so I wasn't really paying attention when I went to grab the food bag and could grab it from the slack at the top. I walked inside and go immediately to change when my partner calls to me, "Did they not give us 2 bags?" I laugh to myself and say, "No, they just dumped everything into one bag until it was bursting out of the top. They should have used 2 though." There's a slight pause, and then I hear, "Well, we're missing all of your food. They only gave us my food." I immediately go and check out the bag, and now it's only half full. But I do see indentations up the side of the paper bag where the corners from my boxes of food had pressed in and made indentations. My food was on top of my partner's. So my first thought was, oh, okay, it had to have fallen out in my car because it was clearly there when I put it in my passenger seat. When I tell you that I tore that car apart, I'm not lying. I checked the damn trunk, and even the hood, and 2 boxes of food and a sandwich were absolutely nowhere to be found. I didn't lose any time on my way home. I know because I regularly check clocks due to my ADHD time blindness, sometimes even several times in a minute. And I know for a fact that every second was accounted for. There are no holes in the car floor or anywhere for it to have just fallen out, and I could physically see and feel that there was a ton of food in that bag when it was handed to me. So it's not like they didn't just give me the food. So somehow, in the time that it took me to drive home, half of my order vanished, and of course it was all of the food that I wanted for myself. As I said earlier, this happened about a month or 2 ago, and I still haven't found the food or any remnants, like boxes or wrappers, anywhere inside my place or my car. And if it was just hidden out of sight somewhere, I think I'd definitely be smelling it by now, but there's no old food smell anywhere either. Are there any possible explanations, or did I just live through a legitimate glitch in the Matrix. Here's what happened. I went to the metro to drive home from where I was, and there are of course 2 directions that I can take, but only one of those directions leads to where my apartment is. So I walk down the stairs to the direction I need to take and take the first metro that arrived. Until here, it's a completely normal ride in the metro until I look up at the display, which says we are now approaching the station that the other metro should be driving to. So I just brush it off, thinking the driver just made a mistake and we'll just enter the normal and expected station. In the metro of my city, there are doors on both sides of the wagon because different stations have different exits, left or right. The station I should be arriving at has the exit on the right side, but a woman goes to the left side of the wagon pretty confidently. I brush that off as well, thinking she doesn't know the city so good and is fooled by the wrong station being displayed. Now we're arriving at the station, and we're at the station that the display said we were, even though it was 100% impossible to get there. The metro I took just came from the direction of the station that we had just arrived at, so what the F is going on? I hope this makes sense. If not, please tell me and I'll rewrite it with pictures of the metro map. But has anyone ever experienced anything like this, and what does it mean, if it means anything? This Redditor submits an edit that actually gives us a resolution to the story. I know some of us like happy endings. They say, I told the story to my mom today and we went through the whole scenario together. Turns out I took the wrong platform and it wasn't a glitch at all. They say, I'm sorry everyone, I could have sworn that I was right, but the mistake was on my side and not on the simulations. This time. I'm writing this in a bit of a panic because some weird stuff just happened and it reminded me of a strange experience that my boyfriend had a while back. We live in a ground level apartment in Nashville with good security, like key cards to access the buildings. A while back, maybe 6 months ago, my boyfriend called me around 2 p.m. on a weekday with a strange question. He asked me if I was standing outside our front door. I responded with the truth, which was I was at work still. He started fully freaking out, saying that he was just playing RimWorld and heard a loud knock at the door. He checked the peephole and saw who he thought was me, allegedly wearing the same clothes that I'd left in that morning. But I never use our front door. I have a key, so I'd let myself in, and not to mention, I was 20 minutes away in an office. He said that when he heard the knock and started approaching the door, he got sort of a sickly feeling like something was wrong. And when he looked through the peephole and saw me, he almost threw up from the feeling. This figure standing at the door was wearing a lanyard like I wear for work, dressed in the same clothes. But her head was down, and she was standing in a way that he described as really off. He was too scared to look through the peephole again and just hunkered down in the living room while we stayed on the phone. Also, disclaimer here, my boyfriend is a bit of an over-exaggerator at times, so I acknowledge that. But I'm also a firm believer in the spooky things in life, having my own paranormal experiences throughout the years with ghosts and cryptids. So, fast forward to today. We're gaming at like midnight and I hear a loud knock at the door. He didn't hear it, but I waited to see if there was another and decided it was probably just him knocking his chair into his desk or something. 10 minutes later, there's another knock, and we both hear it this time. We look at each other and then go to the door to look out. There's no one there, but there's a spot to the left of our door that isn't visible through the peephole, so I tell him not to open the door to check in case someone is there waiting for that very thing to happen. I go to close the blinds and keep listening for anything strange, but nothing else comes. This whole thing brought up the previous story of my apartment doppelganger, and I wanted to post it here in case anyone had any similar experiences with mimic type things in urban areas. I myself had a run-in with a Wendigo when I lived up north, but I find it hard to believe those or skinwalkers would be here in a metro area. Does anyone have any inputs or similar stories or general information on what this could have been standing on the other side of our door that day? Man, I love doppelganger stories. Alright, here's another one. I've experienced many odd and unbelievable events in my life, but this event has been on my mind for a few years now, and I've finally decided to share it. And pray I'm not the only one who's experienced something like this. Let's start from the beginning. I graduated from high school in 2019 and was promoted to supervisor for a kitchen in a nursing home down the street. Since I oversaw dinner, I didn't start work until about 3:30 in the afternoon and would get home at around 10. So for the first half of the day, I would be completely home alone. I enjoyed that time. Solitude was always nice, especially when you're as introverted as I am. Normally, I would sleep in until about noon, but this time I decided to relax on the couch in our main living room and watch Kitchen Nightmares. I remembered nodding off and falling into a light sleep, so any small noise would wake me up. The first few times I cracked my eyes open, it would just be from the cats jumping on me. So when I felt the cushion by my feet dip a bit, I figured it was just my cat, Peach. After a moment, I opened my eyes and realized my younger sister was sitting at the end of the couch, her back to me. I was half asleep, so I didn't really think much of it. I figured she just stayed home from school sick. So I just asked her if she could move her head so that I could see the TV, but she ignored me. Still facing the TV screen, annoyed, I asked her why she was home. Once again, she remained silent, coming to the conclusion that she was just being rude. Again, I closed my eyes and fell back asleep. After about another hour, I got up and started to get ready for work and noticed my sister wasn't in the room or in the house at all. Concerned, I called her. After trying to call her for a few times and getting nothing, I called my mom. She picked up and I asked her if Sis told her where she was going. My mother, confused, asked me what I was talking about. She dropped Sis off at school before going to work. My sister had been at school this whole time. In shock, I hung up and kept this to myself, convinced that I was losing my mind, that it was all in my head, but I remember that moment so vividly. What my sister was wearing, how she was sitting, how I felt a shift in the couch when she... when she sat down. This wasn't a dream. This had to be real. There was something in my house with me that morning, and it wasn't my sister. So this happened a few years ago, and to this day I have zero explanation. It was a very stormy, windy night. It was around 2 in the morning, and I was in the living room FaceTiming a friend like I usually would do. All of a sudden, I hear a thump, thump, thump at our entrance door, and this has me super spooked. I thought somebody was knocking. I then hear my dad wake up to check out the sound, and he looked outside first, and there was nothing. We knew we both heard this sound, so we checked the security cameras, and there was absolutely nothing that could have made this noise. I know I wasn't asleep or dreaming because I texted my friend the moment that it happened. My dad also still remembers. I know it was a knocking sound. Does anyone else have an experience like this? I don't believe in ghosts, and I'm not very religious. I just want to know how this happened. It wasn't thunder or lightning. I never really celebrate my birthdays that big, and usually I just have my best friend over, just like last year. We put some pizzas into the oven, set a timer, and went to my room and chatted a bit. We came back a few minutes later to see how much time was left, and when we came back into the kitchen, my mom was currently helping my little sister with her homework. We stood there and looked at the timer for a while when suddenly it just seemed to stop for a solid 10 seconds or so. I looked around, confused, and so did my friend. At first, I thought our oven might have just had a technical issue, but when I looked at my mom and my sister, they seemed to be completely frozen. And then time just went on again. I didn't think much of it, but then while eating the pizzas, my friend asked if that 1 second also appeared so oddly long to me. Now, this has mainly become an inside joke between me and my friend, but I still think about it as it just seems so weird to me. Last night, on New Year's Eve, my family had a party at my grandparents' house. We all gathered there around 7 p.m. I had been working from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m., so I was already exhausted. I left the party at 9:25 p.m. I know I got home at 9:28 because I FaceTimed my boyfriend while unlocking the door to my house. After arriving home, I put my dogs outside, went upstairs to change into my pajamas, and then returned downstairs to let them in due to the fireworks. I have a picture taken at 10:09 p.m. of me lying on the sofa with one of my dogs, and another picture at 10:21 of the same dog sleeping on me. My brother and dad were apparently home between 10 and 10:40 because they came home and then went back to the party. However, both of them claimed that they never saw me in the house. They even came into the sitting room to check on the dogs because of the fireworks, but couldn't find me anywhere inside. And I never saw or heard them either. According to my boyfriend, I fell asleep around 10:30 on the sofa. He also didn't hear or see my brother and dad, which is unusual because my phone usually picks up people coming into the house from my bedroom. I then remembered my dad waking me around 12:20 and telling me to go to bed because I'd fallen asleep on the sofa. I texted my friend Happy New Year at 12:37 and then went up to bed. When my boyfriend woke up at around 12, he said Happy New Year, and I texted him back instead of just saying it for some reason. He accidentally hung up, so I called him back as I got into bed at 12:43. However, according to my dad, he didn't get home until 1, and my brother got home at 12:50. Neither of them woke me up. I wasn't drinking, and my dad hadn't been drinking either, so we can't blame this on alcohol. It's also not typical for them to team up to mess with me like this. The fact that my boyfriend never heard or saw them confuses me as well, especially since my dad usually chats with him when I'm on FaceTime. Sorry for the lengthy explanation. I'm just confused and seeking a reasonable explanation for what happened. It's been a snowy week where I live, and I had a weird glitch with one of my dogs last night. One of my dogs is happy to stay out in the snow until we literally drag him inside or entice him in with treats, while the other prefers to go in and out every 20 minutes all day. Last night, I let the in-and-out dog in. He brought a chunk of ice in with him and happily laid down to eat it. I went to sit down in the living room, and my husband unpaused the show that we were watching so we could continue. The two of us made some comments about the dog eating ice and other general small talk. About 10 minutes went by while we watched TV together, and all of a sudden, I hear the distinct sound of the in-and-out dog's bark coming from outside. My husband and I look at each other with confusion, and I get up to go check. And sure enough, he's back outside. The door was closed, no one else lives with us, and neither of us left the couch between the time that I let him in and the time that we heard him barking outside. We're both still baffled about how exactly he pulled off glitching his way outside like that, but hey, maybe he can start doing it more often and save me the trouble of going to the door. Ever since I've been driving, I've always made this running joke with my friends that if we're in a place I'm unfamiliar with and I don't know the speed limit, if I say out loud, "What's the speed limit?" a sign will be coming up any second. It's a gift from God, obviously, but it's just subconscious because logically, speed limit signs are placed pretty regularly. Well, on this particular day, I was with my best friend. We were on a road I'd only ever driven down once before, heading to pick up my aunt from her boyfriend's in a town about 2 hours away. We were just chatting, listening to music. We came across this part of the road that was rather luscious, with the trees slightly darker in shade. The road was pretty straight though, and we had been on it for a while, and I said, "I wonder what the speed limit is," worrying that I was speeding, and the speed limit sign literally materialized right in front of our eyes. It said speed limit 45 miles per hour, but it wasn't there, and then it was. It was like an older television. When you turned it on, the pixels would just start from the middle and go out very quickly. I was stunned. I was absolutely floored. I didn't even say anything because I couldn't believe what I had just seen. There was silence in the car for maybe 5 whole minutes because I was literally speechless. And then my friend says, "Hey, did you see that sign just appear?" And I was like, "Yes, I did see that. What the F?" It happened probably 8 years ago, and I still think about it on a regular basis. I'll never forget it, and my friend won't either. My 5-month-old daughter loves this radio toy that she has that plays music. The other night, her and my wife were playing with it. I distinctly remember hearing the tunes that it plays and looking up and seeing them using it. The toy does not look like anything else she owns. The next day, my daughter is throwing a fit, and I ask my wife where her radio is. She says it's in her diaper bag in the car. We haven't gotten out since we went to my parents' a few days prior. I said that's impossible. You guys were playing with it just last night. And she insists that they weren't. I go out to the car, and the toy is sitting in the diaper bag, just like she said. I can't wrap my head around this one. I distinctly remember them playing with this radio toy the prior night. Does anyone have any thoughts?
Yeah, buddy. Don't look at the red lamp.
I've never experienced a glitch in the Matrix before, but I don't know what else to call this strange thing that happened. I have a digital clock in my bathroom and it's right next to the mirror. Oftentimes, I look at the clock in the mirror instead of the real clock to see the time because it's easier when I'm standing in front of the mirror. I was standing at the bathroom counter looking at the reflection of the clock in the mirror, which said 3:07. I quickly glanced at the real clock that was next to me and it read 3:08. I had a split-second thought about how weird it was that the clock changed so quickly that it already read 3:08 before I even finished moving my eyes. Because of this thought, I quickly looked back in the mirror, and this is where things got weird. The clock in the mirror still said 3:07. And as soon as I looked at it, it changed to 3:08. I stared in disbelief as I frantically looked back and forth between the mirror and its reflection, which now both read 3:08, trying to figure out how the real clock said 3:08 while its reflection was still showing 3:07. I was desperately trying to make sense of what happened, but I really couldn't. I genuinely have no way to explain this. As I've thought about it further, I feel as though the time was 3:08 the entire time and the mirror was somehow off. I think that's why it read 3:08 the moment I looked at the real clock, and I think that's why the clock in the mirror immediately changed from 3:07 to 3:08 as soon as I looked at it. I wonder if my thoughts and expectations somehow influenced the mirror image. My husband wears the same shoes to work every single day without fail. Monday, after work, he came home sick. He took his work shoes off, got undressed, and got into bed for a nap. On Tuesday, inclement weather caused his work to close, so he was home for the day. He never needed his work shoes, so he didn't pay any attention to them. Come Wednesday morning, he got dressed and went to put his work shoes on, but they were gone. We have a very small 2-bedroom apartment, and we have absolutely scoured every inch of this place. We looked at all of the reasonable places, then all of the unreasonable places too, and then we looked again, and again. Then we looked in the impossible places. Then we started over. Finally, he gave up and wore some spare shoes to work. Even though we knew his work shoes would not be in his car, he did look there anyway just to make sure, and no, they weren't there either. Today is Thursday, and they're still missing. I keep looking and looking for them in all the same spots, expecting them to just suddenly turn up, because where could they have possibly gone? Between Monday and Wednesday, no one visited or came into the apartment, and the only times he left the apartment himself were to take out the dog, and he doesn't use his work shoes for that. We have no idea where they are. Like I said, it's a small place. If you can think of a place to look, we probably looked there already. We are bewildered. This is one of those rare glitch in the Matrix stories where there's actually a resolution. The writer provided an update and they found the missing shoes. They say, I posted last week about my partner taking off his shoes after work, then going to put them on for work a couple of days later, and they were gone. I'm here to say the shoes have been found. For months, our 12-year-old has left his black tennis shoes by the door. He finally moved them, and we didn't notice. My partner took his own black work tennis shoes off and put them in the exact spot. When we looked at those shoes, for a few times to consider if they were his, we concluded that they belonged to the kid for 2 reasons. Number 1, they were in the exact same spot that the black shoes have been for months on end. And number 2, my partner insisted his work shoes were New Balance brand, and these were Skechers. However, we finally had the chance to ask the kiddo, and he denies owning them. So my partner wore them to work as a test, and ta-da! They are worn in exactly in the right places, and they fit his feet perfectly. These are his shoes. They've been found. But now the question becomes, did his shoes change brands? So at work, I would always walk in, place my hat and coat on the same brown chair in the break room when I got there, and then grab it all at the end of the day. Only one night, my hat was gone, but my coat was exactly where I had left it. I asked around and nobody had seen my hat. A couple of coworkers helped me look up and down. The break room wasn't very big at all, but we still couldn't find it. We looked under the lockers and the vending machines. Nobody could figure it out. A few months later, I walked into the break room and there it is, just sitting on the table like I had left it there. I asked around and no one knew how it got there. I was so grateful because that hat means a lot to me. A couple of years later, I accidentally left it at work at another job while I was in the hospital for a few days, and someone supposedly threw it away. But I'm still waiting for the day that it will show up randomly. This happened on a cruise in 2019 after I ended my second marriage of 25 years. I was completely distraught, and if the trip hadn't been pre-planned, I wouldn't have gone. Let's say my maiden name is Mary Jane Smith, and my married name is Mary Jane White. I kept White even after marriage too. All of my travel documents say Mary Jane White, and Smith is on nothing, nowhere. One night, at a bar, my BFF and I ordered drinks. As the bartender was serving me, he said very loudly, "Here you are, Mary Smith." How did he know Smith? My maiden name isn't quite as common as Smith, but it's up there. My BFF and I were astonished, and I kept asking him how he knew, and he said he just guessed. Do you have any thoughts on this? No, unless the man was actually psychic, he had to have just guessed my maiden name, and that seems to be the consensus. He wasn't from the US, and English was not his first language, so we didn't go to school together, and he didn't recognize me from anywhere. Alright, so check this out. I'm shaking while I'm writing this, and I felt as though this needs to be shared because this marked the day that I know there's way more to life than we think. First off, I have to say that this is my very first time watching The Matrix, and it was on Monday, December 25th of 2023 by myself. I go to the gym every week in the mornings between 10 and noon. On Tuesday, December 26th, I arrive at the gym at 10 a.m., and before I go in, I decided to put my wallet in my driver's side door because I don't need it anyways. I come back and I leave my wallet in that spot until I get home. On Wednesday, December 27th, I go to the gym around 10 a.m. again, and I do the same thing. I leave my wallet in the driver's side door before I go into the gym. I work out, I come back, and then I just drive home, not even thinking about my wallet not being there. When I get home, I freak out for like 10 seconds because I can't find my wallet, but then I realize I left it in my side door. So I go to check the side door, and it's gone. I tore my car apart looking for this wallet, but it's completely gone. I realize it's not the end of the world, and I stay calm, so I just lock all my cards and I go to work, and I don't even talk about my wallet being missing or lost because I know I'll find it, but it's kind of just lingering on my mind still. Here's where it gets interesting. This strange guy that I work with stopped me and jokingly said, "I found your wallet and it had $1 million in it, but I spent it all." And then he laughed. I stopped dead at him and asked him, "How did you know that I lost my wallet?" And then he stopped and looked at me and said, "Are you serious?" Very seriously. We had a very serious conversation, and he's telling me that he can see things before they happen. He said he receives information that he can't explain to anybody. And at this point, he got very emotional, and I strongly felt the energy from that. And then we ended the conversation and got back to work, and I'm just absolutely mind blown at this point. The next day, after I lost my wallet, it's Thursday, December 28th, I'm digging through the side of my door again, searching. At this point, I'm convinced that it just fell out when I opened the door and I didn't see it or hear it fall out. It's gone. That's my verdict. I go to the gym that day at 11 a.m. I checked the side door one more time before going in because that's where I know I left it. I go in, I work out, and before I leave the gym, I ask if anyone has turned in my wallet calmly, and the people at the desk said no, and I was like, oh well. On my way back to my car, I'm already running a checklist of getting a new ID, new cards. You get it. Here's where the glitch happens. I get back into my car, I look down at my driver's side door, and it's right there, exactly where I left it 24 hours ago, at the exact same location where I was. My hair stood up on the back of my neck. It feels exactly as if someone took my wallet while I was in the gym, and then returned it the next day. There was no money missing from what I could tell, and this could either be a universal test for me to see how I would react to losing my money, or this could be a glitch in the Matrix. What are your thoughts on this? This will always be unexplainable to me. And what are the chances that I randomly watched The Matrix for the first time 2 days before this happened? I've always believed that everything happens for a reason, and I know deep in my heart and soul that the universe needed me to see this movie to confirm that we are all living in a simulation. One day, when I was about 18, I was finishing up my senior year of high school, and I was walking home from the bus. From down the street, I noticed that the roof of the house just didn't look right. The pointed part at the very top was inverted and gray. I got closer to it and stared at it. It didn't go away. I blinked my eyes and I rubbed them, but it was still inverted. It was a clear sky with no one else around. I went inside and put my book bag down. Such an anomaly needed to be told, right? I called out, but my parents weren't home. I thought I'd text them, but there was no way that they would believe me without a picture. I went back outside and the roof was normal again. Perfectly normal. No sign of any anomaly. I've never done recreational drugs and I didn't start drinking until I was 21. Every now and then, I look at the roof and I just wonder about it. There's no one to tell. It's not even a very good story and there's no way to prove it. It just irks me when I look at that roof. I have had an interest in 3D modeling for a while. It looked like a messed up 3D model, like something didn't load right. Maybe I was just tired and my brain did all this. I don't know. But the image is so clear in my head, staring at it and watching it, trying to figure out what I was looking at. I wish I could have touched it, but it was too high for me to get to. I almost hope it'll happen again just so I could try to touch it. Of the glitches I've experienced, this one was a bit more mild, but what makes it interesting is that someone else experienced it with me. A few days ago, I was driving back home from a long, sleep-deprived workday and was traveling on the freeway. It's evening, but there's still plenty of light. As I'm driving, I see ahead of me what looks like a large, yellow tarp with words being rolled down above the freeway. I'm really curious about what that's about. But as we drive closer, I realize it's just a normal highway sign about going down the grade. Perfectly metal like all the other ones. There's no tarp or any kind of fabric. I immediately became concerned and said, "Oh my God, I think I just hallucinated," thinking that I must be too tired to drive. My coworker asks, "Do you mean the sign?" and proceeds to tell me how he thought it had been rolled down too. This simultaneously relieves me and freaks me out. I go over it with him and we saw the exact same thing. I'm actually wondering if this is maybe some kind of optical illusion. I wouldn't put it past being a glitch because I've experienced some weird stuff before, but I can't find anything specifically related to this. This story is a sweet one. I just wanted to share the silly little glitch in the Matrix that just happened. I walked to the Whataburger to get food for my boyfriend, my brother, and myself. While I was at the register, I grabbed the last 3 cookies that they had and the cashier charged me for them. I threw them in the bag when it was all ready, and then I walked home. I was telling my brother I would have bought more cookies if they had them, but at least I got 3. After getting home and eating our food, we pulled out the 3 cookies out of the bag to eat them, and then my brother went back to the living room to play on his computer where he found 3 more cookies sitting on the table. I only grabbed 3, and it was the last 3 that they only charged me for, so maybe I'm being silly, but these extra 3 cookies just kind of appeared out of nowhere. Friday evening, I went to a friend's birthday party with my wife. I was driving, so no alcohol from me that night. Before we left, I closed the shutters in all the rooms on the ground floor, including those in my study. Fast forward to about 2 a.m., when we returned home, my wife and I had a fight and both went to bed angry. She fell asleep rather quickly, but I was so torn up that I couldn't sleep, so I got up again and went to the study to use the computer. I distinctly remember checking again if the shutters were down when I entered the room, because I hate having them up after dark. By around 5 a.m., I finally felt sleepy again and went back to bed. At 10:30, I was awoken by the postman ringing the doorbell, and wife was still asleep. I decided not to go back to bed, so I made coffee and went to turn on the computer. When I opened the door to the study, I was greeted by the morning sun shining through the window. The shutters were up and it left me deeply confused for a moment. After the wife got up, I asked her if she had been awake and opened them for some reason while I was asleep, but she said no. The shutters are also not electric, so they can't go up through a technical malfunction. If I hadn't have been focused on them being down in the night, I wouldn't give it a second thought, but as it is, I don't know how that could have happened. Another possibility that I've contemplated and ruled out was that it had snowed on Thursday, and the snow in the backyard where the window was facing is still perfectly untouched. If someone had been on the property and pushed up the shutters, which I'm not already sure if a person can do, there would have been footprints. My parents built our house on an old cotton field on Native American land. We're tribal and lived about 10 minutes away from Tahlequah. Small things would happen in the house, like seeing people walk past, hearing strange noises, and picture frames hanging in unnatural ways. We took pictures in the house, and many of them came out with black blobs all around us. I often didn't want to sleep alone, so I slept with my parents a lot due to fear. I was 13 when I saw my first figure. I saw him and immediately went into fight or flight mode with only one exit that he was standing in front of. I ran through him and he vanished. My dogs were barking at him too. And one night, when I was around 16, I was sleeping alone. There was a lamppost outside my window next to my bed, so my room was illuminated by that. I went to school the next day and found an image taken at 5 a.m. on my phone. You could see me sleeping with a black figure around me, with visible head and shoulders. It wasn't completely black. You could see the light from the lamppost shining through it. I showed my parents, and they were terrified. The next day, my phone fell into the lake, and I was never able to retrieve the photo to show anyone else. We also experienced random flashes of light throughout the entire house at times. My sister had to move out of her room upstairs due to feeling an overwhelming presence, like someone touching her hand, or someone getting on the bed while she was trying to sleep. Once, I was lying down and felt someone pushing up on my mattress. There was no way someone could fit under my bed, and no cat could have done that. It felt like a fist pushing up on the bottom of the mattress. My mom would hear stomping upstairs, thinking maybe my sister had someone over, and she would go upstairs to find that no one was there. Not even my sister. It wasn't just my family who heard, felt, and saw things. My friends did too. But they would only tell me these stories later on because they didn't want to scare me further at the time. 3 of my friends saw the exact same man that I saw, and one of them wasn't even a close friend and didn't know about my experiences. Once, my ex and I were taking a shower together when the curtains started shaking, which terrified us. We eventually left that house, and my family and I have never experienced anything like that since. I've never felt more uncomfortable than in that house, and now I can finally sleep in the dark or even alone without fear. Sometimes I consider going back just to see if it feels the same, but I'm honestly afraid that something would follow me. About a year ago, we got a dog named Ripley, and when we got her, they gave us a handful of things to go with her. Some toys, a thing of dog bags, a leash, and a collar, stuff like that. So when we got her, they gave us a purple collar for her. She wears it all the time as it's the only collar she's ever really needed, therefore the only one she has. One day, we're about to take Ripley for a walk and we're looking for her purple collar. So we look around for a while trying to find it. Finally, I find it hanging on a doorknob and I go to tell my mom. But before I can, my mom comes across the corner and says, "I found it." And she's holding Ripley's purple collar. Okay, but I'm also holding Ripley's purple collar. We look at each other really confused and compare the two collars, and they're identical in every way, shape, and form. It was so weird. To this day, we have no explanation as to why or how we ended up with two identical collars. This happened to me yesterday morning while I was getting ready for work. I live on the second floor of an apartment building. It was 5:25 a.m. and I was making coffee in my kitchen. I had just filmed a Snapchat video for a relative at my coffee machine when I noticed that I was running late. I use a magnetic flashlight attached to my fridge so I can see when I make coffee, and I took it with me on my way to the living room. My apartment isn't big, so to walk to my living room, I just had to turn around. When I turned and began walking, a green light from outside my living room window caught my eye. This window faces my neighbor's large, mostly empty master backyard. I stopped walking and stared for a moment. The light looked to be the size of a softball and appeared to be floating at around waist height. It was bright green, but it didn't appear to be illuminating its surroundings. I caught sight of it while it seemed to be in motion, moving back and forth a short distance at a walking pace. My initial thought was that my flashlight was just making a strange reflection, so I turned it off. Yet, the green light still remained and was still moving. As soon as I realized that it must be something outside, I tried to quickly pull my phone out to record a video. Unfortunately, the Snapchat I filmed earlier was still playing on my phone, and it hindered my ability to be quick, as I had to take a few seconds to delete it before being able to film a new video. When I was finally ready to shoot the video, I looked up, and the light was gone. I looked left and right outside the window and saw no sign of it anywhere. This entire encounter lasted probably only 30 seconds. I've tried explaining it away, but I come up short every time. It could have been a person. It was too dark for me to tell, but it was 5:25 a.m., it was snowing, and it was 14 degrees, so that doesn't make a lot of sense as to why someone would be out there with a green flashlight. I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood, and while I don't know my neighbor whose backyard this occurred in, I rarely see him outside doing yard work or any maintenance at all. My one somewhat fitting explanation is maybe someone has a collar on their outdoor cat with a light to keep track of it. But I've lived here for over a year and I've never seen that before. I've been needing to talk to someone about this without sounding like I'm crazy or jumping to conclusions, so if anyone has had any similar experiences or has a reasonable explanation to offer, I would appreciate hearing them. We have chickens, and the easiest way for us to water them all is to fill the kiddie pool that we have for them. About a week ago, I noticed the morning after that I had cleaned and filled it, the pool had been empty, like completely minus about 3 inches of water. I was so confused because our 3 chickens can't possibly have used or spilled that. So I mentioned this to my wife as a weird happening, but I figured I had just somehow mistaken my filling the pool for a couple of evenings before, since I regularly do it. Then we went on about our life. Fast forward to last night. My wife had filled the pool at about 4 p.m. and the chickens got put up at 8. This morning, she let the chickens out of the barn and the pool was empty, except for about 3 inches of water. Has this ever happened to anyone else? This is an enclosed area with no reasonable assumption of someone coming in and doing this. This happened about 4 years ago. I was 16 at home with my mom. I had a very strict household and I always obliged any dumb tasks or rules, so I was an overall good kid. I got home after school, and this was during the white vans phase where everyone had like 10 pairs of them. I had those, but one pair in particular was painted with SpongeBob characters, all homemade, so it couldn't have been duplicated or bought off somewhere. Our house rule was shoes were to be upstairs in your room, outside of the house next to the door, or on the shoe rack in the office. The office is also upstairs. My mother was in the office sewing, and I proceeded to take my shoes off and set them on the rack. My mom even witnessed this. About 15 minutes later, we both go downstairs and I see my shoes. The ones that I had taken off 15 minutes ago and set on the rack upstairs. However, they weren't just downstairs. They were underneath the dinner table with the chairs pushed in, making it an impossible task for someone to do without reason. Perfectly placed side by side underneath. My jaw dropped when I saw it, and my mom broke down and freaked out after seeing this. I've never been able to explain it, and she hasn't either. We were home alone the entire time, by the way. Damn, Daniel. When I was a teenager, I was walking down the road one evening and looked up at the sky. I could clearly see the evening star, which is Venus, like always. Except this evening, there were 2 of them. I was baffled, and I couldn't make sense of it. Both objects had the exact appearance, luminosity, and width of the evening star. They were somewhat close to one another. They were about 2 fingers apart at arm's length. Then, I felt as if they were very slowly moving clockwise around a common center of orbit. As they were moving, they maintained the same distance from each other, which was a diameter of a circular orbit. Their speed and rotation kept increasing until they got fast enough to almost form a ring. Then within the blink of an eye, they both moved down toward the horizon, parallel to each other, and disappeared from my line of sight. From the moment I laid eyes on them to the moment they disappeared, it all happened within a span of 5 seconds. I was completely conscious, sober, and aware of my surroundings. I've thought a lot about what I could have seen. It couldn't have been something man-made, as nothing could move and travel that fast. They couldn't have been from a light source on the ground either, because they appeared to be tangible objects. Also, they didn't seem to be in Earth's atmosphere and literally had the appearance of the evening star. Just like how you can tell that planets and stars are in the sky and not in the atmosphere, but celestial bodies that are extremely far away. Long-time casual lurker. I'm creeped out and I'm not quite sure what to do with myself. I had a friend over last night. We ran into each other earlier in the day and we made plans to have dinner together. She comes over and we hang out on the couch for around an hour, just chatting and whatnot. I stand up because I get a phone call, so I go into my bedroom for around 10 or 15 minutes. I go back out and she's not there anymore. Okay, so she's in the bathroom, right? I sit on the couch to wait for her, but she doesn't come out. I go check on her. The bathroom is empty. Now I'm weirded out. Did she just leave for no reason? I didn't hear the door open or close, and I have a pretty heavy door. I even go outside into the hallway to check if she was there for some reason, but she just promptly disappeared. So now I'm thinking she left for whatever reason, so I call her. It rings for a while and she picks up. Immediately, I think it's weird. If she did leave my flat, she should be on the street, but it's very quiet wherever she is, and she sounds like she just woke up. I ask her why she left my flat, and she had no idea what I was talking about. I get frustrated and ask where she is. I could hear rustling sheets, and as I said, there's no way her side of the phone call would be so quiet if she just left my flat. I live in a busy area. I request to video call her, and there she is, in her home, in her bed. She has no makeup on, she's in her jammies, looking confused, and her eyes are still kind of puffy from sleep. I ask her if she remembered coming to my flat, and she looked confused.
Did we make plans today?
She said that after running into me, all we did was chat, say goodbye, and then she went home to take a nap. Obviously, there's no way she got home, removed her makeup, undid her hair, and changed her clothes within 15 minutes.
I'm at home.
She lives like a half an hour away from me.
Your phone call just woke me up.
I have no clue what happened or what to think of this. So this happened earlier this year, and I have literally no explanation for it or any idea how or why it happened. Me and my mom were talking about something and we went in for a hug. Our ears lined up perfectly with each other's, and immediately, coming from inside her head, I heard what sounded like an internet dial-up sound, followed by the sound of an angelic choir of children singing two beautiful chords. It was very fast. The whole thing probably only lasted about 5 seconds. I was super shocked, so I pulled away expecting her to ask me what was wrong, but she pulled away at the same time, and we just looked at each other with the most shocked and confused expressions on our faces. She asked me, "Did you just hear that?" I said yes, and then I asked what she heard. Well, you can imagine my surprise when she said that she heard the same internet dial-up sound, followed by a bassy synth and percussion beat from the inside of my head. We've tried to recreate this many times since, but nothing like it has ever happened again. I have no idea what it was. I've tried to Google and see if anyone has experienced anything like this or has any explanation, but whenever I look it up, it just pulls up articles about schizophrenia. It sends my brain for such a loop whenever I think about it. Has anyone else ever heard of anything like this, or have any explanation for it? I'm open to hearing anything. I used to be upset when I thought my mom had eyes in the back of her head, but I think I'm glad she's never actually heard my thoughts before. I do dog boarding and dog sitting. I was driving to a client's house for the 4th time in 2 days. It's near my neighborhood, so the area isn't super unfamiliar. I'm not under the influence or tired. Their road is Portobello, and I know the house number. My GPS tells me to turn, so I do so, verifying the street sign. I begin looking for the wreath on their door that I had been using to identify their house, but I don't see it. I turn around, roll down my window, and start looking at the house numbers. Theirs ends in 53. I see 49. I see 57. Wait, what? I think I missed the house. But they're all right next to each other, and I was looking carefully at the house signs. I turn around and drive by again. There's 57, there's 49, but no 53. Starting to get shaken, I look around. I see the distinct shrubbery of the house across the street that I'd noticed on my last visit as I was leaving. I drive back, nothing. There's no house number 53. I leave the neighborhood, I go back to the main street, turn around, and I drive back to Portobello. Driving down, I see 57, and then I see 53. It's right there, plain as day. I call my best friend as I enter the house to talk to me because I'm shaken. She talks me through the 30-minute visit. As I'm leaving, a huge white wolf-looking dog is staring at me from the end of the walkway. My brain starts panicking, which I express to my friend. A guy comes into view and I see he has a leash and is walking the dog, just letting it wander pretty far into this yard. As I'm driving home, the owner sends me a text. She said that it showed on her Ring camera when I left, but not when I arrived, and she found this weird as that had never happened before. I entered and exited through the same front door. So, what the cinnamon toast frick is going on? I hope you're liking the stories so far. If you are, click the subscribe button and leave a comment that says Cinnamon Toast F in the chat below. You can spell out the whole thing if you want to. I've just labeled this podcast as non-explicit, and I'm going to commit to that, but you don't have to. Have fun. The time is 8:23 p.m. I was sitting in my living room, reading a book, and suddenly there's a large thud, and from nowhere, a family of 4 wearing all black walks across my hallway, opens the door to my storeroom, and goes inside. I was too shocked to do anything. I couldn't even process what I had just seen. My sister came rushing from her room, noticeably concerned about the thud, and I guess she sees me frozen. She asks me about the noise, and I wasn't able to speak. I didn't know what to speak. I gathered enough courage to walk to the storeroom and open the door to find nothing. She comes to me and asks what the heck happened. I explained to her what I just saw, and as expected, she laughed it off. I don't know what this was, but it was the most terrifying thing I've ever encountered. Alright, so check this out. I have an 18-month-old baby girl, and part of our routine is every Monday, we walk from our flat to a park and back via a different route through another park because she likes to look at the cherry blossoms. We've done this every single Monday for around 13 months now. I never change the route, and it's roughly the same time every week. We took off, got to the first park, and all was okay. But for some strange reason, I felt like I was in a panic. My heart rate was high, I felt a bit anxious. I didn't really want to stay, but my daughter was having a good time. Eventually, I worked out that there was no one else in the park, just us, and it's usually quite full, so I thought that must be it. We started our walk home, where we changed the route to walk through the second park, which has the cherry blossoms. I know this route like the back of my hand. Crossed at a set of lights, and then first right and up the hill to the park. It's not a complicated route. I was walking with my head down and suddenly realized I have no idea where I am. I've never seen this road before. I've lived in the city for 16 years. It felt completely off. There were no cars. No leaves. Every road here is covered in them. There's no wind. It was deadly silent. I went to stop and walk back the way that I came, presuming that somehow I managed to screw up the route. And then suddenly, a car drives past with a woman in a brown jacket and hat and a pair of black sunglasses. I think, well, I'll just keep going. And then I end up at the park somehow. Then another red car. Same woman with the same jacket, hat, and glasses, but a slightly different car. I think that's a bit bizarre. And then it happens again. Red car, woman in a brown jacket with a hat and glasses. I pick up the pace and then I start going down a different street, but something felt really bad about going that way, so I kept going straight, and after about 20 minutes of walking, I get to the end and I'm on the road that takes me to the park that I was aiming for. But suddenly, all the noises, the leaves, and the cars are back. I get to the park and check my phone, and it's 2 p.m. I left the first park at 10:45 a.m. It takes 25 minutes to get from that park to the second one. I couldn't have been walking for more than 20 minutes down that street. The following day, I woke up early for work and I couldn't stop thinking about the road, so I left earlier in my car and I couldn't find it anywhere. I tried 2 different ways, one where I entered and one where I exited, and the routes I ended up on were not that road that I had walked down. I just can't work it out. I couldn't sleep for 2 whole days thinking about it, and now I can't stop seeing the face of the woman in the brown jacket. But I don't remember ever actually acknowledging what she looked like at the time. I used to be in the army. One day, about 6 years ago, 4 of my soldiers and I was a sergeant at the time, were working on our vehicle maintenance on Motor Pool Monday. I had been with this organization for almost 2 years, and the process for turning in our maintenance paperwork had always been the same. It was inspect the vehicles, annotate any faults on the paperwork, bring it to the mechanics to verify those faults, and once verified, bring it to the company XO. After I passed out the maintenance paperwork for that week to my soldiers, they went out and tried to complete the task. However, they came back to me a little while later to let me know that the mechanics were refusing to verify the paperwork and said that they were supposed to bring it to the XO first and then it would go to them. This irritated me because I knew the process and that was wrong. I figured it was just a new mechanic giving out bad information, so I went and talked to the maintenance chief warrant officer. When I told him the process that we were trying to do, his exact words were, "We have never done it like that, Sergeant." At this point, I feel like I'm being pranked, so I call my platoon sergeant. He tells me that I'm wrong, and it's never been done that way that I remember. Well, it wasn't just me that remembered it that way. All 4 of my soldiers were just as confused as myself. We asked our buddies from other platoons, other mechanics, and other sergeants, and everyone told us that we were in the wrong. Wanting to just be done with it for the day, we all complied with the process. A week goes by and Motor Pool Monday comes back around. My soldiers and I do the process that we did the week prior. I go to bring the paperwork to the XO before the mechanics, and he looks at me and says, "What are you doing, Sergeant? These have to be verified by the mechanics first before you bring them to me." I laughed and asked if he was joking, but he said he wasn't. So I went back to Motor Pool and asked the maintenance chief, who affirmed the process that I knew was right from the beginning. I went back to my office and told my soldiers, who were all just as confused as I was. Everyone had gone back to the original way, and no one had any memory of the other process other than my 4 soldiers and myself. We couldn't think of any good explanation for what happened other than a really weird shared glitch. This process never changed again. It remained the same for the next 1.5 years that I was with the organization. To this day, I randomly think about this and it drives me crazy not knowing what happened there. Alright, so check this out. This is the biggest glitch I've ever experienced. Back in junior high school, when I was 16, my family and I were moving to a new apartment. Near the end of the day, me, my dad, and a family friend, who I didn't really know then and haven't talked to since, were walking from the apartment to the elevator so we could go to the car and grab the last few things from it. When my dad stepped into the elevator, the door closed almost immediately. It was specifically weird because the door had only been open for a couple of seconds, and it closed way faster than I've seen an elevator door close before or after. The door won't open, so we're all confused. We're talking to Dad, he can hear us and we can hear him, and then suddenly, mid-sentence, his voice just cuts off entirely, and then the door opens, and the elevator is empty. So, me and the family friend just sort of stare for a second. I step in and look around, and there's no sign of Dad. I step back out of the elevator, and immediately the doors close again, and then reopen, and Dad's just standing in the middle of the elevator, looking, dumbfounded. So we ask him what happened, and he explains that, from his perspective, that after the elevator door closed, at one point he stopped hearing us, and the elevator went up. Then it just stopped, and he heard what seemed to be wild animals that he couldn't identify, and the sound of scratching on the door. He said this felt like it lasted around 5 minutes before the elevator door opened. We lived there for over a year, and we never did figure out what happened, and the elevator never did that again. I was doing a walking tour, and right at the start, there's a public toilet. One of those box cubicles in the street that you put a coin in to unlock the door, and it washes itself after some time. Well, there was a queue of people who wanted to use the toilet before starting the tour, and I joined the queue. People are coming in and out. We get to the last 3 people in the queue, and an older lady is taking a really long time in there. We start to worry that something happened to her, so I knock. No answer. I knock again, and I shout to her. No answer. I realize that the green vacant light is on. I put a coin in, the door opens, and the cubicle is empty. Everyone swears that they saw this woman go in, and there's a line of people standing by the door with their legs crossed, waiting for their turn to use it. Surely someone would have noticed if anyone came out. I think she disappeared. One day, my mother and I were visiting a town a few hours from home as a little weekend getaway. They have a downtown that's full of shops and restaurants and such. We were walking through, and on the corner of one of the streets sat a few shops clustered together that looked like they were brand new built. One of the stores was a Thomas Kincaid store with all of his paintings, which my mom is absolutely in love with. It was a small gallery with a store to purchase all of his pieces. We lost our home to a big wildfire a few years ago, and my mom lost her Kincaid painting that was hanging in the living room, which was just a small one that wasn't a very popular one of his. When we walked right in, the first painting straight in front of our faces was the painting that we had in the living room. We were a bit shocked and weirded out, but we continued to stroll around and eventually ended up in the store. The cashier was incredibly nice. She stated that her family opened the store because Thomas used to visit the town often. We asked her if the store was temporary just because it was an art gallery, and my mother didn't have enough money at the time to replace her painting. The lady said no. Thomas himself left money aside to open a shop for him. And my mother told her that we wanted a painting eventually and had the lady write down her number so we could call when we had the money. She also took my mother's number just in case the painting was sold. We left and went back home. 3 months later, we got our wildfire insurance money and headed to the town to get the painting. No answer on the phone call though. We walked through the downtown and walked up the small hill. There was no building or store anymore. It was just gone. There was no construction anywhere or anything. It just kind of seemed like it poofed into thin air. We were so confused. We went into the candy store that faced the shop and asked the cashier if she knew what happened to the Thomas Kincaid store. She looked at us confused and said that she's worked there for years and that lot's always been empty. At this point, we were absolutely confused. We searched the internet and the Yellow Book pages. There was absolutely nothing. We just shrugged it off and then went home. A few months passed again and my mom got a call. It was the lady and she was asking if we were still interested in ever coming back. At this point, we were genuinely freaking out. My mom double-checked her address and everything. So we planned another little trip to head back there. And when we walked to the same place that we had walked to a few months ago, there it was. We asked the same lady if they had moved locations or anything within the past few months, and she looked at us confused. She said that they had always been there. We bought the painting and left. We have no clue what happened there, and we're still so weirded out and shocked. This happened to me in December of 1969. I'm a retired RN. I've experienced or witnessed many things that are beyond understanding, but I'm also a critical thinker, and my story changed my thoughts on our limited view of reality forever. I was with my high school boyfriend on a typical Friday date night in Jeffersonville, Indiana. After socializing with friends at the local hangouts, we would ride out on the rural back roads that were located between downtown and my home in a subdivision. There were dairy farms and cornfields on either side of the road for about 6 miles. The few homes along this stretch sat on the back of properties, and there were a couple of equipment paths that led to small open fields that were our parking spots, basically. Past that, the 2-lane narrow road was heavily wooded with no homes or cleared property at all for maybe 10 miles. This particular road had many curves and hills, which is typical for southern Indiana. Sparse population and teenage driving led to many accidents. There were no cell phones in these days, and the standard operating procedure if one saw an accident was to stop, help, and pray for another motorist to appear to flag down to send to the nearest house to call the police, an ambulance, or transport the victims to the hospital yourself. It was a very cold December night and the snow flurries began. We left our parking area immediately as my curfew was not to be missed. The remainder of our drive to my home was through the wooded area, and on straightaways we saw taillights quite a bit ahead. As they were approaching the second sharp curve, we saw headlights shining from ground level at an angle towards us. We immediately slowed and pulled off the road as far as possible. The grille was damaged and the passenger side had stuck trees. The headlights in the otherwise pitch-black night were blinding. A fully restored, beautiful 1956 Chevy had apparently tried to take the curve too fast and had lost control. The car was off the road on its roof. My boyfriend, Greg, grabbed his flashlight, got another one for me along with the first aid kit from the trunk, and we ran to assist anyone that might be injured. The headlights had kept us from seeing how many passengers the car held, and I clearly remember my heart pounding from the adrenaline and my mind fearing injuries as nobody was shouting back to our calling out and nobody was attempting to get out of the car. I could smell the strong odor of gasoline and burned rubber. The engine was running and making a knocking sound. Greg got down on his knees and opened the driver's side door, and I opened the back. The car was empty. He reached up and turned the ignition. The engine was now off and the woods were silent. Nothing was making sense. Our headlights and flashlights were giving us light, and we started searching for a possible injured person. The windows were rolled up and starting to fog. Greg had already searched the interior. At this point, our assumption was that the driver must have gotten out and we just hadn't seen him or her. We didn't understand why they hadn't answered us as we ran to help or why the car had been left running. We continued to search for a person all around the wreck, and we tried to go into the woods, but the underbrush and steep embankment was impossible to climb. At this point, we decided whoever was driving may have just walked away. We got back into Greg's car and drove slowly 3 miles back, then turned around and drove slowly the next 6, fully expecting to find someone needing a ride home or to a phone. We were relieved that the driver must not be hurt, but also couldn't imagine why they didn't see us and how they left on foot without us seeing them. No other vehicles had come down the road. At this point, the remaining road that we drove was covered with snow and we saw no tracks. There were no houses. We went to my house where my parents were waiting as I was really late at this point, and Greg told my father what had happened and then described the car and how beautifully restored it was in case he knew who it belonged to. The whole incident just left us baffled. By the next day, we decided that maybe there was a house in the woods or a side road that we had missed. We were both just unsettled by the whole thing, and we didn't really know why we were worried about what now appeared to be a non-event. The next day, we went back to the scene of the accident, and both of us felt that we would find a house close by that had gone unnoticed or a side road or something. We didn't understand why we were still dwelling on it, but little did we know quite the opposite was to be found. The car was still there, but had been moved into a clearing in the trees. I'll never understand what happened the night of the Chevy whose taillights we followed hit the curve and rolled. There it was, still upside down. The accident happened on a Friday night, and here we are on Sunday afternoon staring at it still. The paint was faded, the body was completely rusted through over the majority of it, the tires were completely rotted, and the rims were rusted. The interior was dry rotted and covered with mold, and the windows were gone, and the windshield was broken, with a basketball-sized hole full of vines growing in and out of the car. The embankment that we had tried to search was now a clearing, and setting further back into the woods was a small abandoned 2-room shack. We later did a property search, but it only led us to owners that had bought acreage with shack and a car on it. All we were left with was a lifetime of questions surrounding a cold December night. It's been years now, but that night still haunts me. My wife was traveling over the weekend for a get-together out of state with her college friends. She left Saturday morning and came back Sunday night. Nothing was out of the ordinary. It was a normal weekend. It was about 9:45 p.m. that I hear the door open. My dog greeted her as he always does. I was in our office, which looks down the hallway. I see her come in and say hi, and she says, "I have to pee so bad." And she goes to the bathroom and shuts the door. There was nothing unusual about that, until 10 minutes later, I hear my dog excited at the door again. I look down the hallway and see my wife greeting my dog, and she walks down the hallway, and guess what she says? "I have to pee so bad." And then she walks into the bathroom and shuts the door. There was nothing weird afterwards, I just simply cannot explain that. I know damn well she walked in the door 10 minutes earlier. Everything from the way my dog greeted her, to the way she walked in, even to the way she spoke, the cadence was the same. Everything was the same. It's like my brain hit the rewind button. This actually just happened. I was cleaning up my desk and I accidentally moved a few books to the side where I had put my glasses earlier. I thought to myself, oh shoot, when I noticed, but it was already too late. My glasses fell to the right side of my desk and I even heard the noise of them falling to the floor. I got distracted for a second, but when I went to pick them up, they were gone. There were a few cables in that side of the desk, so at first, I thought they had just gotten stuck and I just couldn't see them. But I untangled all of the cables and there was still no trace of the glasses. I've looked everywhere, even found old items that had gotten stuck in small spaces near the desk, but the glasses are absolutely nowhere to be found. I checked in the weirdest places possible, including my shoes, because, I don't know man, what if? Right now, I'm just kind of anxious because I really need them, and I get headaches if I don't wear them for too long while at school. Maybe I'm just sleepy and need to get back at it tomorrow, or maybe I just put them somewhere else and don't remember. Either way, this is weird and I feel like I'm about to go crazy. I had just moved to the US when this happened. It was during the summer a few years ago. My family was living in a farm in rural Florida as it was free housing provided by my dad's employer. The farm itself is nothing worthy of describing, aside from the fact that our little apartment was a 10-minute walk from the other rooms for the employees. Another employee had a daughter that would sometimes ask to play with us. I was 15 or 16 at the time, so I didn't feel inclined too often, but my sister is younger by 2 years, so they were closer in age and would go play with her to practice her English. One day, she went to play with her and left around 3 p.m. When the clock hit 5, my mother asked me to ring her phone as she didn't want her walking around alone that late. I agreed to call her, and it went something like this.
Hey, Mom wants you to... Yeah, I'm on my way. Be there in 10 minutes. Okay, hurry. Yeah.
And then hung up. Now, it was my sister. I know her voice like I know my own. So when she walked in 20 minutes later, I was like, I said hurry. And she was like, yeah, and how did you do that, dumbass? And I told her I called her and about the rest of the call. She looked at me confused, but not overly, so probably thinking I was just trying to save myself from telling Mom that I had lied about calling her and asking her to come back. Well, I left my phone charging here, so I don't know who you called, and then she pointed behind me. The phone had been there the entire time. I checked my call logs. I called her and she answered, but hers didn't show anything. It was her phone number in my call log. This is by far one of the freakiest things I've ever experienced. This person includes several edits that say, I never thought others would find this glitch interesting. I'm editing to add some details that I previously left in a comment. Those details include, the call was about 15 to 30 seconds, and the caller responded to my sister's name. The entire conversation was in Spanish. My sister and I seldom speak to each other in English. This is another detail to keep in mind, as I mentioned it in another comment separate from this one. We have a distinct accent that resulted from our parents being from different regions. I know that it sounds coincidental, but this is one of the reasons that I can swear up and down it was her, which I neglected to mention at first. The dialogues that I included here aren't exactly what I said. I could hear the call clear as day. It wasn't muffled or staticky. And I don't know how else to describe it, but I can swear over hot fire that was my sister's voice. Another edit includes that the phones were the same model. They were the Samsung J7 Prime, as those were the phones we owned when we arrived in the US. We don't have them anymore, and those phones were wiped clean before being sent to a family back in our home country. Now we own iPhones, and there's no way of checking our current phones, and I can't pinpoint an exact date to check with our phone provider. This was in late 2017. The submitter includes one final note that says, "While I remember checking the call logs of her phone, I showed her this post today on December 5th of 2023 as it got some attention, and we seem to remember something differently. It was 6 years ago after all, but while I remember the call not being on her phone, logged or otherwise, she says the call rung as missed while my phone logged it as a call. Needless to say, I'll keep my post as is because I remember it not being logged, but if you wish to take my sister's account of it being missed instead of ghost call, well, that's up to your discretion. I have no concrete way to prove either way wrong." This happened several years ago, but I'll set the scene. I was visiting my parents, and my brother lived with them. My brother was gifted a beautiful orange corn snake named Ozade. One day, I hear this blood-curdling scream coming from my neighbor's house, and I look outside to see what's going on, and what do I see? Ozade just vibing outside. My parents live in a duplex, and Ozade was rarely out of her tank. So I go outside, I look her over, and yeah, that's her. I pick her up. At this point, I'm super confused, so I holler up the stairs to my brother, "Hey man, why the F is Ozade outside?" He says, "Huh? She's not." I say, "Well, not anymore, I just grabbed her. How the F did she get outside?" He says, "No, seriously, she's not, she's right here." He walks to the top of the stairs with Ozade in hand. These snakes were completely identical. Beautiful, beautiful corn snakes. And corn snakes are not wild. I thought she must have been someone else's pet who had escaped. I went around to all the neighbors and asked, but no one had a pet corn snake. I posted something on Craigslist and posted flyers. If she was someone's pet, she was well taken care of, just like Ozade was. But no one ever claimed her. The sad ending to the story is that my cat got a hold of the second snake and punctured its skull several months later. It didn't survive despite our best efforts. It still trips me out every time I remember this. How did this snake double? How did the exact same corn snake just randomly appear in front of my parents' apartment? In 1988, a friend and I were staying in an extremely small one-bedroom house for a week in the middle of the Allegheny Mountains. The closest neighbor was almost 5 miles away, and there was nothing but country. Late one night, we were up listening to music, and I heard a dog scratching at the door. It was a small, friendly Jack Russell, so we let it in and gave it some food and water. We were sitting in the living room when the dog ran past into the bedroom and then slowly backed out of the bedroom, growling and snarling with the fur on his back standing straight up. We both stood up, grabbed our jackets, and walked out of the house. We stood outside the front door, calling for the dog, but the dog wouldn't come, so we shut the door and walked away from the house to calm down because it freaked us out a little. We kept our eyes on the front door. There was no back door, and the house was easy to see because the porch light was the only light around for miles. It was dead quiet. We didn't hear anything. We couldn't even hear the dog anymore. After about 30 minutes, we went back into the house, and the dog was gone. We've never seen it since. For a few days, we tried to figure out how the dog could have gotten out of the house, or what could have spooked it so bad that night, but we never did. The dog couldn't have gotten out without someone letting it out. We didn't see anyone come out, and as far as we could tell, there was no one around for miles. We didn't see another person or a car drive past the entire time that we stayed there. Me and the friend that was there that day are still friends to this day, and every now and again we bring it up and try to explain it in a way that makes sense, but we never can. In 2007, a friend came around my house. We were going rock climbing, but first, coffee. I boiled the kettle, took 2 mugs, placed a spoon of instant coffee in both, no sugar or milk for either, and we chatted about the plan for the day while the kettle boiled, and then when it was boiling and steaming up my small kitchen, I poured the boiling water into the 2 mugs, stirred, I handed him one and I took one myself. I carefully took a sip, and it was stone cold. Like I'd made it with water from a bottle in the fridge. "Hey, Matt, is your coffee okay?" He looked at me quizzically and said everything was fine. I showed him my coffee and how cold it was. Having just watched me make it, neither of us had any clue how or why this happened. I'm sharing this story because I think there are others who are suffering in their own lives and feeling hopeless right now, and I'm hoping that by sharing this, it might restore some hope in your listeners who may need it right now. This was in 2017, and I had recently moved to a new city where I didn't live near any friends or family members. This was a particularly hard point in my life because I had just escaped an abusive marriage and was trying to start over fresh in a new place. I was driving a rusted 1997 forest green Chevy Cavalier at the time because I was broke and couldn't afford a better car. This car had been giving me trouble lately and for as long as I've had it, because it was 20 years old at this point and something seems to break down on it every other week. But it was all I could afford to drive at the time. I was driving on the highway on a crisp autumn day, and this day had been a particularly bad one. You know, one of those days where you've had enough and every little thing gets to you, and everything seems to go wrong all at once. I began to feel my car start to sputter, and it started shaking as I tried to drive it. Oh, now what? I thought to myself, and as I mentioned, this was a very horrible day where everything was going wrong all at once, and I just needed one single thing to go right in my life right now. So this was the worst time for anything to go wrong with my car. My bank account had a near $0 balance, and I couldn't afford to fix or replace any additional issues with this car. After it started to sputter and vibrate a bit, I heard a loud popping noise that scared the life out of me, and my car was beginning to drive more slowly than usual, even though I was flooring the gas pedal. I panicked when I realized that I had to get off the highway and pull over to the side of the road immediately before I got into an accident. So I put my emergency flashers on and steered my malfunctioning car to the side of the highway. I know it sounds strange, but it was like I was only able to pull my car over at the very last second, with not a second to spare before it died and before I got into an accident. It was strange, and I can't explain it, but in any event, I steered towards the side of the highway and turned my car off. This was the last thing that I needed today. I tried to start my car again, and it just made sputtering sounds, and the ignition would not engage. I don't know much about cars, but I know that this isn't good, and I was in trouble. I sat back in my seat and gave up trying to restart my car out of frustration after several failed attempts. What could I do now? I don't have the money to fix any more problems with this stupid thing, and I can't afford a tow truck to tow me somewhere. I don't know anyone in this new town, and I felt very helpless and alone in this moment. I had had enough today, so I lost it and began to sob uncontrollably. After about a minute of this, I suddenly heard a voice almost telepathically say to me, "It's going to be okay." Now, I'm a very skeptical and logical person, And this didn't make any sense to me, considering that I couldn't pinpoint where this voice was coming from when I heard it say it inside my own head, and I wasn't the one saying it. And no, I don't use drugs, I don't have any mental health issues, and I've never suffered from hallucinations before, in case you were wondering. I looked in my rearview mirror and immediately saw a red sedan pulling up behind me, which then stopped. I watched through my rearview mirror as a very tall man with shoulder-length blonde hair stepped out of the red car and approached mine. I don't know how to explain it, but there was something strangely familiar about this man. He was very tall and somehow felt, different than other people in a way that I can't put into words. He felt very loving, safe, and kind as he walked up to my driver's side window. He briefly made eye contact with me, and I could feel so much love and kindness emanating from him, even though I can't explain how. "Can you please pop your hood for me?" he asked me without vocal words. I was taken aback and really flummoxed when I realized he was speaking to me inside my head telepathically and without moving his mouth at all, and even if he had been speaking out loud, I wouldn't have been able to hear him because my window was still rolled up. Yet I understand every word he was saying. So I popped the hood of my car and waited. "This'll only take a minute," the kind man told me, again telepathically. Now, like I previously stated, I am a very logical person and I'm quite skeptical, but even I couldn't deny that this person was talking to me telepathically, so I popped the hood of my car and I waited. I felt my car sway from side to side as he was doing something under the hood. I don't know what he was doing though. What I can tell you is that it would take a lot of muscle power for a single man to make my car rock from side to side this much, and it rocked my body as he did this. I had no idea what he was doing since he was hiding behind the hood of my car, but he was clearly doing something. After only a few seconds, maybe 10, he emerged and told me telepathically, "Can you please try and start your car again real quick?" So I turned my key in the ignition and perhaps by some miracle, my car started immediately. I was in shock. Who was this man? How did he just fix my car that quickly and without any visible tools? He nodded and closed the hood of my car and began to walk back to his car after making brief eye contact with me again before he left. "I could just hug you," I exclaimed telepathically. I felt more grateful than I could express in words. He briefly held his hand up before he walked back to my car. "It's not necessary." And with that, he walked back to his car and I was in shock. He didn't ask me for anything in return and just fixed my car for free and for some reason knew exactly what was wrong with it and was talking to me telepathically. What the hell just happened? I felt like I might be going crazy until I realized that my previously broken down car was now inexplicably running perfectly again without any mechanic fixing it, and I had objective, observable proof that I was not. I felt stunned and I sat frozen in my car for what felt like forever before I looked into my rearview mirror again, and I know it sounds crazy, and if this had not just actually happened to me, I wouldn't believe it, but his red car literally vanished right in front of my eyes. It disappeared right in front of me, and I watched it happen through my rearview mirror. In 1 second, the red car was behind me, with him sitting inside of it, and the next second, it was just gone. I don't understand how this is possible, and I've given up trying to even rationalize it logically to myself. I have no idea why this man helped me so generously and for no known reason, but before I gathered myself and tried to merge back onto the highway, I heard that same voice say to me telepathically, "I told you it was going to be okay before, and I meant it." This was the same telepathic voice that I had heard before, and I felt paralyzed, and I couldn't seem to move or drive away until I heard this person out. "I know you don't remember me, but I remember you, and I want you to know that I have loved you forever, and I will love you forever, and you need to do nothing to deserve this love or reciprocate it. It just is. My love for you is endless, timeless, and perhaps I've loved you over many lifetimes. I was paralyzed and I felt an overwhelming wave of energy take over that I can only describe as endless, unconditional love. I began to cry again, but they were good tears this time. I couldn't actually move my body, no matter how hard I tried, but I distinctly remember trying to move my arms to roll my driver's side window down because I felt too hot. And yeah, it was one of those old, non-automatic crank levers, but I couldn't actually move my arms to do it. I felt paralyzed, and as this person spoke to me, it felt like his words were resonating inside of my soul in a way that I can't describe in words. I've never met this human being before once in my entire lifetime, and I had no idea why he was acting like we knew each other. I was finally able to unfreeze for a moment and ask him, now telepathically, "I've never met you before, so are you an alien or something?" He said, "Perhaps I am an interdimensional alien human from the future. I'm someone who has loved you through many lives and lifetimes. I'm sorry that it's confusing, and I understand why you can't remember me." What does that even mean? I wondered to myself, and I tried to ask him. What the hell is an interdimensional human alien from the future anyway? And again, I promise I wasn't high or drunk when this happened, but he didn't answer me or talk to me anymore. He was just gone. I'm a rational person, and I wanted answers, but he never answered my question, so I was left wondering, what the hell did I just experience? If I was making all of this up in my own mind, my car wouldn't be running and functional again after it broke down earlier without any mechanical service. I honestly have no logical explanation as to what happened, why he seemed so familiar, or who this man was. In any event, I thought this experience was worth sharing, and by the way, I've never had any more problems with my car since this. I can't logically explain away what happened to me, but I wanted to share it because it restored my hope during a time in my life where I had none, and I hope that by sharing this, it will do the same for others. Life gets so hard sometimes, and I think that many of us feel like we're drowning in hopelessness, and we feel so alone sometimes, and maybe we can't imagine anyone existing out there who loves us without requiring anything from us in return. But this experience proved otherwise to me. This one experience completely changed my life, and I'll explain how. After this happened to me, I began to see things differently, and without knowing how or why. I was slower to anger, and I now have the psychic capacity to see things from other people's perspectives in addition to my own, in a more expanded way that I wasn't able to before. I'm now able to empathetically feel and physically see what other people are feeling and thinking as if their thoughts and feelings are my own. And yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but it was like after this happened to me, I saw and felt how we're all connected through time and space. And when you hurt another person, you're actually hurting yourself, as we are all one. This one experience has made me a better person, and I try to help others now whenever and wherever I can. Anyway, thanks for listening to my story. I know it was a bit long-winded, and I hope that everyone listening to this now feels less alone and hopeless and more loved than before they heard it. No matter where or when you happen to be inside of this matrix, no matter who or where you are, know that you can make the world a better place by being more selfless and kind, and hey, kindness never hurt anyone. The rug is a little under 5 feet and is a circle, shaggy rug with a grip padding on the bottom. The house is not on a slant or hill, and there's no other furniture that touches the daughter's rug that can push it. The rug is in the middle of the room with a small rocking horse on top of the rug. I see that the rug shifts in my daughter's room so that it's pressed against her dresser. I then pick it up and shift it to the middle of the room again. After a week or so, the process repeats. Normally, I would think it's my daughter that's playing on top of it or using her rocking horse that's shifting the rug towards her dresser, but the rug has a rubber grip base and there's an additional rug non-slip rubber pad that we custom ordered to fit the rug under the bottom. My toddler was born premature and is less than 20 pounds with not much more strength than the average child. I tried to jump on top of it, shift it with my feet, and the rug and the padding is very hard to move and would be impossible for my daughter to do so simply by playing on it. I've also tried turning and moving the horse on top to different parts of the rug for a few weeks at a time, and the rug always shifts into the same position in the room. We have no idea what's going on. User Mike2Dog is in the comment section. He says, I can deal with hills having eyes, but if rugs have legs now, I'm out. That's funny right there. First, I have to explain a couple of things so everybody will understand. The first thing is, in my country, we put coins of a particular denomination in grocery store carts to unlock them. And the second thing is, when we pay the utilities, we pay in physical cash at the administrator's office. I always keep 2 coins in a pocket in my wallet, so I have them to unlock grocery store carts. It's one of those pockets that has a zipper. So yesterday, I went to pay the utilities and I end up using the 2 coins to pay the exact sum because I was the first person in line and the administrator had no change. This morning, I checked my wallet to see if I had enough cash on me, and lo and behold, the pocket was open and the same 2 coins were back in there. I was stunned. No, nobody could have put them there. My partner doesn't even know that I keep 2 coins there. I'm taking it as, your finances are fine, money will come, don't worry. Because the last couple of days I was a bit pissed about an unexpected $650 bill, and the universe wanted to maybe give me a wink. This is by no means my first glitch, but it is a notable one. I live with my parents. My mother leaves for work every day at 6 a.m. and comes back at 3 p.m. Today, she comes back at 10 a.m. I talked to her and asked why she came back so early. She told me that she managed to get off early and that she wanted to make a late breakfast soon. I said, okay, call me when you're done. After about 2 hours of waiting, I realized that I couldn't hear any sounds from the kitchen, and I always do when someone is cooking something. So I went to the kitchen and my mother was gone. I went through the whole house. My mom was nowhere to be found. I was alone at home. I thought it was strange because my mother always tells me when she goes out. For example, if she goes to the store or to even water the flowers in the garden, she always lets me know. So I went back to my room and went back to playing my game. At 3 p.m., my mother comes back. She called me, which she always does, said hello, and I asked her, why did you leave the house and not tell me? And where were you anyway? She replies, well, honey, I was at work and I always come back at 3 p.m., don't I? I explained to her that she was home at 10 today and that I talked to her and that she even told me she would be making a late breakfast. She explained to me that she wasn't. We talked about it for a while, and then my mother decided that I had simply mixed up the days. But I don't think that's possible. She was at home. I saw her, and I spoke to her. And this isn't the first time something like this has happened to me either. I'm sharing this story because it happened to me today. I have to share something bizarre that happened to me a while ago, and it's been eating at me ever since. Here's a bit of background on me. I'm a 31-year-old guy living in the southeast side of Norway, and I work as a web developer. My daily routine has been pretty much the same for the past 3 years. I walk to and from work, usually arriving at the office around 5:30 and then leaving again at around 1400 or 2 o'clock. So here's where things get weird. It was a typical early morning walk to work. I was strolling along the roads on the outskirts of my city, plugged into my tunes and soaking in the serene beauty of the autumn-winter night sky. My route is pretty straightforward. It's a dimly lit road with a sidewalk on each side, and I always stick to the left sidewalk just out of habit. Now, I love to gaze at the stars and moon during my walk, especially in the crisp air. However, this particular morning took a turn for the strange when my Samsung Galaxy Buds started acting up, losing connection to my phone sporadically. I fiddled with them for a bit but eventually gave up, attributing the issue to a dead battery. And that's when I noticed it. The air was thick with a static charge, reminiscent of the atmosphere before a thunderstorm, yet the sky was entirely clear. I tried to shake it off and continued my walk, but then the hair on my arms started to stand on end, and an intense ringing assaulted my ears. I thought maybe I was having a panic attack, which I have had a few times in the past, so I employed my usual coping techniques. Unfortunately, they were to no avail. In the growing state of alarm, I scanned my surroundings only to realize that somehow, impossibly, I was now on the right sidewalk. I hadn't crossed the road, I was sure of it. An eerie silence enveloped everything. There was no wind, no distant city sounds. There was nothing. Even the moon seemed to betray me, showing a phase indicating a week had mysteriously passed. I frantically checked my phone, and it was dead. My watch had also stopped ticking. The distant city lights, which should have been visible, were enveloped in an unsettling darkness. Now, I was genuinely freaking out. I closed my eyes, desperately trying to rationalize the impossible events unfolding around me. My heart raced as the static electricity and the ringing returned. Fearfully, I opened my eyes, and I was back on the left side of the road. The static and the ringing had stopped. The moon was back to its correct phase, and the distant city lights twinkled almost reassuringly. My phone and watch were functioning as if nothing had happened, and apparently, only a few minutes had passed. I sprinted the remaining 2.4 kilometers to work, my mind whirling with the inexplicable occurrences. I didn't share this with anyone until now, but there's one more thing. I remembered that my exercise app was running on my phone during the incident. When I checked it upon reaching work, I noticed that the GPS had lost track of me precisely at the time of the incident. I can't explain what happened, and maybe the phone's power loss could account for the GPS issue, but still, has anyone ever experienced anything like this before? I'm at a loss and would love to hear your thoughts or similar experiences. There's a lot of comments on this story that said this person was abducted. But abducted by what? If you have any interest in hearing true alien abduction stories, leave a comment below or answer the poll on Spotify. Thanks. This happened a few years ago. As a teenager, I loved doing magic tricks as a hobby. I was at a wedding, and whilst at my table, I was messing around, fiddling with a fork and a napkin. I decided to role play doing a magic trick, just for my own amusement, and I put the fork inside the napkin. I covered it, and then I imagined myself making the fork disappear. I actually thought to myself, imagine I open the napkin and the fork is actually gone. Well, I open the napkin and the fork is gone, and I have no way to prove it to anyone. The other day, I was in my backyard speaking with a close friend on the phone. Unfortunately, she has a close family member in the hospital who was taken off life support and was dying. She was very upset, and for good reason, and I was trying to calm her. I was telling her that her loved one wasn't in physical pain and that her soul was transitioning, pointing out that when someone dies, they have peace, that it's just the living that really suffer. As I'm saying all of this, something in the grass catches my eye. It was a seashell, just sitting on top of the grass like someone had placed it there. And I'm not talking about a parking lot seashell, I'm talking about a beautiful, pristine seashell that I would be thrilled to find on the beach. What's weird about this is that I live in a small town in the middle of Texas. I couldn't be more landlocked. There isn't a coastline for hundreds of miles. I thought it was odd. I picked it up and finished the conversation with my friend. After we hung up, I looked up the spiritual meaning of a seashell. For context, I am that annoying person that's always looking for the greater meaning in things. And well, FYI, the symbolic meaning of a seashell is literally the soul leaving the body. It represents the body or shell that we leave behind when we die. I found a physical representation of exactly what I was saying to my friend at the exact moment I was saying it. I felt like I found the origami unicorn in Blade Runner. This happened maybe a month ago, but I didn't think of posting this until now because of something that happened yesterday. I was watching a TV show on the bed when my dog comes into the room, chomping on something hard. I can hear it crunching in her mouth. Realizing she shouldn't have anything to be chewing on right now, I dove onto the floor and I immediately wrestled it out of her mouth. I'm fully expecting it to be like a piece of plastic or a wood chip from outside, but it's not. It's an entire toenail, completely yellow with a little blood on the edges from where it had been pulled off. I immediately started gagging and threw it into the trash. I didn't think much of it at first because my dog had been playing with my fiance's dirty sock maybe 15 minutes before I caught her with this disgusting toenail. I assumed my fiance had lost a toenail due to some accident at work. He's supposed to wear steel-toe shoes, but doesn't always. And that my dog had managed to get it out of the sock. I went to confront him, like, "Gross, I just found the dog eating your toenail." And he just looked at me weird. He said he had no idea what I was talking about, and immediately showed me his feet to show that he has all 10 toenails perfectly in place. I look at my own feet, and I also have all 10 of my toenails. And then both of us started to get really grossed out and very creeped out. Me and my fiance live in our apartment alone and don't have company over at our apartment like ever. Maybe once every 6 months or so. And we especially don't welcome people to take off their shoes when they do come over. I know some people might be thinking, "Oh, your fiance must be having people over secretly," but I really don't think that explains it either. I trust my fiance, and when he's home, I'm home. We have the same work schedules, and we spent nearly all our time together. Plus, this toenail was so yellow and thick that it had to have come from an elderly man. I don't know, in my opinion. We had been living in our apartment for 2 years at this point, so the chance my dog found a disgusting bloody toenail from the previous tenant is slim too. Not impossible, I guess, but slim. I don't have any pictures of the nail, but I assure you that no one would want to see it. I remembered this story yesterday because I actually lost one of my toenails yesterday, following me bruising it with a pair of heels. The toenail actually went missing mysteriously before I even noticed it was gone. I found it ironic that I found a mysterious toenail in my house a month before my own randomly disappeared off my foot. Gross. Hey, listen to another episode. Alright, so check this out. I've always read these so-called glitch in the Matrix stories and thought to myself, are you sure you didn't just forget where you put it? And if you're asking me, then yes, I'm certain. A couple weeks ago, I pulled my Halloween box out of the closet for an outfit. The box contained seasonal decorations and nothing else. I decorated with them. I dug to the bottom of the box and there was a Jesus and Mother Mary nativity scene. And by the way, I'm not super religious. I got all my mom's hand-me-down holiday decorations. There was also a cheap voice changer, nothing else. The box was practically empty. I mean, I could see the bottom. Today, I asked my mom to run to her storage unit to grab the box that contained my costume. We got in a small tiff because I was so certain the outfit was there. I have other Halloween boxes in storage that I couldn't otherwise fit in my home. She swore it wasn't there and told me to double-check my closet. Well, lo and behold, the same empty box now contains a giant trash bag with my dress and a giant, impossible-to-miss white shoebox, along with the cheap voice changer and nativity scene that I saw a few weeks ago. There's a joke about moms being able to find things in plain sight after we've torn up the house looking for them. I'm convinced that it wasn't even there until she told me to check again. I've apologized profusely and she laughed it off, saying she knew it wasn't in her storage. I cannot stress how vividly I can see this box being empty just a few weeks ago. For those who don't know, baby wipes usually come with a plastic flip top on the package. However, these are refill packs that have just a thin, resealable sticker on top instead. I hate that kind and I never buy them. A week or so ago, I opened my cabinet to discover that all of my wipes were refill packs. I had just bought a box and figured I had bought the wrong ones. I was annoyed and even complained to my husband for having thrown away the box that they came in. I would have returned them. Oh well, it's not the end of the world, I guess. Yesterday, I went to the cabinet to get a new pack of wipes, and they're all flip-top packs again. There's not a single refill pack in there at all. My husband doesn't do the shopping, but I asked him if he replaced them anyway. He swears he didn't, and now we're both really tripped out. I can't explain what happened, but here's how it started. I arrived at work at 6:30 a.m. as usual, and everything seemed normal until I reached the building. The security guard was absent and the gate was open, which was unusual. I assumed the guard might be somewhere else and proceeded to park my car in my regular spot. To describe the layout, there are 3 elevators. Directly opposite of them is a door leading to the stairs. To the right of the elevators, there's a large door, and to the left on each floor is the restroom. As for my routine, I've made it a habit to take the stairs since I work on the 4th floor. It's my way of staying active. So, as per usual, I entered the building and opened the stairwell door. It was dimly lit, which I found odd, but I didn't dwell on it. I climbed to the ground floor, passing the closed door. The next flight of stairs was even darker, and I heard a strange, low rumble from above. As I ascended, I noticed that the door at the top was open and it was dark inside. Reaching the door, I was shocked to find that the 3 elevator doors were replaced by a wall, with only the small monitors glowing faintly red, all indicating by the letter G that they were on the ground floor. Peering from outside, I saw that the other doors were missing too, leaving only a dark room with the elevator monitors visible. I partially closed the door and realized that the 1st floor sign was missing. Feeling a chill, I hurried to the 4th floor and to my office, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. During my break, I ventured down the stairs again, only to find that the door now had its sign and everything inside looked normal. I'm certain of what I saw. Am I losing my mind? And I can promise you, I wasn't on drugs or sleep deprived. When I first moved into my current home, the cable company installed my router in the back corner of a closet near one of those cabinets that look like where you would put a circuit breaker panel. The coaxial cable came out of a roughly 1-inch diameter hole in the top of the little cabinet. Everything worked fine, and I never touched the router except for a couple of times when I had to reboot it. The last time I did this was months ago. Yesterday morning, my internet stopped working, so I went to the closet to reboot the router. But it was missing. The spot where it had sat for months was empty. The power cord was plugged in, but I couldn't find the other end of it. By the way, there were, and always have been, a bunch of other cables and devices from other internet companies in the cabinet as well, because my building gives me multiple internet options. They were all crisscrossed with each other, and I never bothered trying to untangle them. But I didn't see my coaxial cable at all. I hadn't left the apartment at all the day prior, and the door was locked all day. That night, as I was going to sleep, I heard some moving around from the general direction of the closet, but it's a big apartment building and a small apartment, so I just figured the neighbors or someone was in the hallway. I called the cable company, told them that my router was missing. They told me that they saw it was online and sent a reboot signal. It went offline and then came back on about a minute later, and my internet was working again. I untangled the cords, and the power cord led up to the 1-inch hole at the top of the cabinet. So, I guess basically, without my touching it, the router somehow climbed itself up a hole that was way too small for it and lodged itself inside my wall. So I just discovered this subreddit and I need to get this off my chest. A few months ago, I had gone on a walk down my house's road and out onto the main street. I turned left and walked for a while and then turned around and went back to the neighborhood road. Nothing strange there. However, when I walked back onto the road, I saw a man that I had never seen before. Now that I think about it, the trailer he was sitting by was at a 45-degree angle from the road, and none of those exist in my area. Anyway, he had a big fire going in his yard. I was strongly tempted to go sit by the fire and have a chat, which was odd. I'm usually extremely wary of strangers, but I decided to just go home. Once I got to my house, it kind of clicked that house and guy and fire pit weren't real, or at least weren't normal, like they didn't exist before my walk. The fire was huge. I mean, how would this guy have started such a big fire in the maybe 10 minutes that I was off the road? At this point, my house started giving me the heebie-jeebies, so I speed walked back out to the main road instead of going inside. The man by the fire smiled at me as I walked past. He was a very friendly-looking man. I walked down the main street to the right for a while, turned back around, and walked home. But now the man was completely gone. I had my family come down the road with me. I thought maybe I'd simply missed him on the way back down, and the fire was really cool, so we should check it out anyway. But nothing was there. No man, no fire, no clearing, no 45-degree house. I choked down the sick feeling in my chest and brushed it off with my family as just being tired. It was maybe 10 p.m., but they urged me to go to sleep anyways. Wherever I was, I'm glad I got out of it by walking to the main. Nothing like that has happened before or since. There were a couple of other strange things that happened that night, but that was the most salient thing. I still have no idea how to explain it. It's just one of 2 paranormal and weird experiences that I've had in my life that made me question reality and my sanity. This happened about 2 years ago, and I still have no explanation. How did these parenting books end up in my car? Any logical explanations are welcome, but I really doubt we'll find any. Here's some context. I was on my third date with my now boyfriend. We were meeting at the beach so I could teach him to surf. He didn't have a car at the time, and I knew I would be driving him home after we surfed. My car is usually a pigsty, so I diligently cleaned it before our date because it was too soon for him to see my true messy form. My car was spotless, and the only thing in it was 2 surfboards, my wetsuit, and some surf wax. I parked a few blocks away in a neighborhood near the beach, and I unloaded my car and carried the boards to meet him at the beach. At this point, my car is completely empty, except for the surf wax. We surfed for a few hours, and then we both walked back to my car. Now, here's the glitch. I open my trunk to load the boards into my car, and I see 3 parenting books sitting in my trunk. I immediately screamed, "These aren't mine," because I guess my first instinct was that it would be so weird to have baby books with me on a third date. I took a closer look, and I had literally never seen these books before in my life. I think the weirdest, glitchiest part is that I parked directly next to one of those free mini book libraries, so it's almost like someone dropped off their books and then they glitched into my car instead of staying in the library. Here's more proof. My first thought was that maybe I had left my car unlocked and someone, for some weird reason, tossed their books into my car instead of the library, but I actually have proof that my car was locked. When I surf, I have to remove my physical key from my key fob and tie the key into a pocket on my wetsuit. Then, I lock my car with the key fob while the doors open, toss the key fob into the car, and close the door. When I come back, I unlock my car with my physical key, and my car alarm always goes off until I press the unlock button on my key fob, which is inside the car. It's literally a horrible system, and every time I surf with someone new, they make comments about how bad my system is, and my boyfriend made the joke about the alarm going off, aka my door was definitely locked. Also, note that I don't have kids, and neither do any of my close friends, so no one I drive regularly has any need for parenting books. I asked pretty much everyone that I knew if they put the books in my car to mess with me, but everyone said no. And that wouldn't make any sense anyways. I cleaned my car right before my date. I saw that my car was empty when I left it, and then saw the books when I got back. I should have kept the books to investigate them more, or in case there was some weird reason that I was supposed to have them. But I threw them into the book library before I could think too hard about what had happened. Are there any logical explanations for this? This happened about 10 years ago. I was driving my boyfriend at the time in his car to the mall. He didn't tell me that his master cylinder was failing and the brakes were acting weird. They were usable, but you had to fully let off of them before you could use them again. He was used to driving like that. I was not. We got into the parking lot of the mall, picked a space, but forgot about the brakes. I was kind of riding them, as you do in parking lots. I'm going into the space and there's a car directly in front of me and one directly kitty corner. I have no time to stop and nowhere to go that isn't into another car. I aimed for the tiny space between the cars, but I'm so sure that I'm gonna hit one or both. But I get through into the next lane and nothing. No crunch, no crash. I get the car parked and start investigating. No damage to any of the cars. I'm looking at the space I somehow made it through and I'm like, how? We were both baffled at how that happened. It didn't look physically possible. I still don't know how I managed and I still think about it often. And yes, I made him drive home. So this is super strange. I've been certain that I've seen some odd things myself, but haven't ever remembered them until I experienced this today. It's relatively minor compared to so many that I've read here on this subreddit, but I thought this would be a fun one to share. We were just shopping at the store and decided we would get a toy for our son that we were keeping secret from him. Not too hard though, he's 3.5. So I scanned it, I put it in the bottom of the bag, and then continued with the other items and put them on top of the toy. My wife and son walked away to go look at something else real quick, so I just wrapped up the scanning and put everything in the basket. As I finish up, I turn around and the toy is laying by itself in the basket outside of the bag. And remember, it was on the bottom of the bag with other multiple heavy things on top of it. And I quickly try to work out how that could have happened. My wife and son are away from it, no one else is near us. I just think that maybe the bottom broke and it fell out, but the bag is still intact. So I think it's weird and carry on since it was busy. I pay, then we head out to the car. I pay no more attention to the toy and we load up, my wife putting in the couple of bags while I load the child, which is our standard routine and her preference. We drive home and I pull our son out and then get the groceries out. I start to worry because I don't see the toy in the back and I wonder if my wife somehow left it in the basket. Once I put all the bags on the counter, I look through the bag and there it was, once again at the bottom of the bag under all the other items where I'd originally had it. I asked my wife about it and whether she'd seen if it was in the cart or in the bag, but she was utterly confused about what I was talking about and completely dismissed me on it. So I knew she hadn't seen it out of the bag, but even if she had, she wouldn't have made the effort to put it snugly at the bottom of the bag under all the items. Overall, this is just a super weird experience. I know it's a minor thing in terms of glitches and what is typically on this subreddit, but it was so distinct and wild, I just wanted to share. Do you typically notice these kinds of things more once you catch the first one? I live in a cabin in Alaska where moose and earthquakes are not uncommon. The moose sometimes rub up against my cabin when they're walking by it, and the cabin will shake as a result. A couple nights ago, the cabin was shaking pretty steady, and I thought it was at least a 4.0 earthquake. I checked for a report of an earthquake and nothing came up. I looked for moose footprints in the snow the following morning and didn't see anything, but I guess I didn't think much of it. Not 10 minutes ago, I thought I felt my body starting to sway, and indeed the cabin was moving because I saw things that were dangling move and heard and watched them rattle. Again, I see no earthquake reported, and when I go outside to check for signs of a moose, there's nothing. I'm the last person to believe in things that are out of normal explanation, but I'm fairly unnerved by this. So I'm cutting up onions for guacamole. I step away from my cutting board for literally 20 seconds. Upon returning, I'm greeted by a packaging popcorn on my cutting board just below the onions. Yup, that filler they use in packages? It was extremely weird. We have none of these in our home, it just appeared. I plan on keeping this said packaged popcorn and placing it in my sunroom amongst my singing bowls and crystals. It was really, really weird. I guess it's just another day in the Matrix. I had an experience which I'll never forget, even if it had been like 2 or 3 years ago, because I felt like it was one of those moments which, up until now, I couldn't explain. One afternoon, I was chilling in my apartment. I decided to do some laundry. I have a quite busy schedule, so usually I let them pile up for 2 weeks before I even touch them. However, this particular period, I wasn't able to touch my 2 hampers for a whole month. I did the usual, separate them and such, but I freaked out when I saw the exact same top that I was wearing that afternoon. It was an old, grayish top that I had been wearing since college. It had been 5 or 6 years old at this point. It wasn't even mine. It was originally my aunt's. She's still alive. And I kid you not, the shirt that I was holding is like the exact replica of the one I was wearing. They both even have a slightly ripped neck area and the same little holes on the same side. I like wearing it because it's soft and comfy. Now, the only thing that I buy in twos are underwear and leggings, so I'm pretty sure I didn't buy the other one, and there's no way for me to even get another one because that's my aunt's. I called my mom because she knew about this top and she knew it was one of my favorite pieces of clothing. Maybe I just missed the fact that all this time I really had two. She thought I only had one too, though, and she used to wash my clothes, so she would know. I was just going to let it go, but I was so freaked out that I even had to show it to my aunt as well. And guess what? She didn't even know where the shirt came from, and she only had one of the shirt. It's not really a creepy story, but I still wonder about this sometimes.